Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville, and I would invite everyone to rise and join Council in singing the national anthem. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. It was much better in rehearsal, and we all owe a debt of thanks to Mervyn Russell for carrying us through the song. All right, Madam Clerk, we have no regrets this evening. Everyone is here. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are none visible. Council, you have before you the minutes for the regular session of Council on May 27th and the confidential minutes of May 27th and the minutes of the regular session of Planning and Development on June 10th and the minutes of the special session of Council on June 10th. Is there a move and seconder to approve? Councillor Delegate and Councillor Gittings, all in favor? And the minutes are approved. We have no public presentations for this agenda, but we have delegations. And the first listed delegation is Andrei Adam on the climate change emergency, which is the item 4 on this evening's agenda. Mr. Andrei, if you'd come to the center, and you don't have to lean into the microphone or anything. If it's working at all, it'll work fine from where you stand.
Good evening, Council. My name is Andrei Adam, and I'm in grade 11 at Abbey Park High School. I'm here to speak in support of item 4 on the agenda and convince you to declare a climate change emergency, as well as to encourage you to take more aggressive steps to fight the climate crisis. This isn't the first time I've been here before Council, giving a speech, encouraging you to do something. Back when I was in grade 6, I was before you, asking that you build a basketball court in my community. That was me then, right here. But that was then. Way back when, whether or not we were going to have a basketball court in my community was the most pressing issue on my mind. When I came up here before, I didn't know that the United Nations would say we only have until 2030 to reverse the trend with our carbon emissions or risk ecological and societal breakdown. I didn't know a quarter of Earth's biodiversity would be at risk, or that there would be 3 times the number of extreme heat days. I didn't know that my future and the future of my kids would be at risk because of the inaction of people that came before us and will be long gone when the effects of the climate crisis hit. Had I known that sooner, I would have been standing up here before you sooner as well. In grade 6, I was told that if I wanted to speak before Council, I needed to show that my idea of building a basketball court had support. I got 50 people who believed in what I was doing to write their names on a piece of paper, and I brought that for my speech. 6 weeks ago, I started another petition, this time calling on Oakville Town Council to declare a climate change emergency. What was different about this petition was that it was online, and it went viral. This post urging people to sign the petition got shared over 300 times in its first day. At first, it was getting passed around just by my friends, then by people that I had maybe met once, and then it became parents, teachers, and grandparents, people all across Oakville I had never known of, signing the petition and writing their messages of support. Today, the petition stands at 1,600 signatories, 1,600. 1,600 people that are here behind me right now, 1,600 people urging that you declare a climate change emergency. The climate change emergency report the town commissioned last meeting clearly shows that the climate crisis is an emergency. In it, it says that climate change threatens human health, the local economy, and our built and natural environment here in Oakville. Around the world, scientists are telling us our carbon emissions are making the planet uninhabitable. The UN is telling us it's an existential threat, and economists are telling us it risks uprooting all our financial systems. If this is not an emergency, what is? We wouldn't be the only government to declare a climate change emergency. More than 40 municipalities in Ontario, 623 jurisdictions around the world, and 13 countries, including ours a week ago, have declared similar emergencies. However, in other places such as Guelph, similar motions were defeated because of the misconception that this is a purely symbolic gesture. It is anything but, and we cannot let this motion fail here in Oakville. Words have power, and no one knows this better than newspapers. That's why The Guardian has stopped calling our altering of the climate as climate change, but rather as a climate crisis or climate breakdown. Their editor-in-chief explained the shift, saying, "The phrase climate change sounds passive and gentle, when what scientists are talking about is a catastrophe for humanity. We want to ensure that we are being scientifically precise while also communicating clearly the importance of this issue." Communicate clearly. That's exactly what the town needs to do. When talking to councillors, what I hear most is that we need to get average people more involved in reducing their emissions. Maybe the reason they're not engaged right now is because they don't know the urgency that exists to act. Let me give you an example. If your house is burning down and you say the exterior of your house is changing, your neighbors will watch it burn down. But if you react with, "Oh my God, this is an emergency," they'll be much more likely to call the fire department, grab a bucket, and start putting out the flames. It's really that simple. Just by changing how we talk about the climate crisis, we suddenly change the conversation from being a passive one that we're witness to something that we need to start acting upon. Words drive action. And that's why the town of Oakville must pass this climate change emergency. But 1,600 people didn't sign my petition just for you to declare a climate change emergency. They believe Oakville has an obligation to do more to tackle the climate crisis. In any discussion I've had with town staff about the issue, I hear all about the progress that has been made. Heck, 14 out of the 17 pages in the report commissioned last month were dedicated to what the town has done so far. While I'm impressed, Oakville needs to do more. To start, let's take a look at the town's current reduction strategies. Oakville has committed to reducing emissions 20% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. If every country in the world were to achieve Oakville's reduction targets, our planet would still warm between 2 and 2.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. That's way above the 1.5 degree target set in the Paris Accord. The effects of that 2.5 degree increase would be unimaginable, yet it will be my generation who will bear witness to its effects. So on behalf of my generation, Oakville is not doing enough. The United Nations Intercontinental Panel on Climate Change is comprised of the thousands of scientists who provide the science related to global warming. This panel released a report last year which said that to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is more than in the Paris Accord, we must reduce emissions 45% by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2050. If the town of Oakville wants to continue being a leader in the fight against the climate crisis, it must do everything in its power to reach these new IPCC targets. I know that the town is working with community partners through the Community Energy Plan, and I'm encouraged by the work the task force is doing to find ways the town can reduce emissions further. It's great having a goal, but right now, the UN and 1,600 signatories are telling us that goal is not good enough. We can do better. We must do better, and I hope the CEP does just that. Beyond the Community Energy Plan, myself and some high school students put together a report with what could be included as reduction measures. Some of the highlights include EV charging stations, implementing green roofs, putting a price on wastefulness, and a bunch of different ideas. I'll be happy to talk about who best to receive the work and who to work with to implement some of the ideas after an emergency declaration is passed. But it all comes back down to the climate change emergency. As soon as I put out the petition, people started messaging me. What can I do to reduce my emissions? I've seen firsthand that by one person calling the climate crisis for what it is, an emergency, it spurs people to act. Without the petition, there would be no 15-page report because no one would have asked to work with me in creating one. Frankly, passing a climate change emergency might be the single greatest reduction strategy the town has. Heck, as soon as it does pass, 1,600 people will be getting an email telling them that no, they're not crazy. The town agrees with them that this is indeed an emergency. The next question all of them will be asking is, what's my role in solving this crisis? To wrap it all up, I guess it's fitting that I've been here in front of you before, because both times I've been basically asking for the exact same thing. The last time I was here, I was advocating for the kids in my community. Your unanimous vote in favor of the basketball court gave those kids a place to play. Now here again today, myself and 1,600 other people are begging on behalf of entire generations that you declare a climate change emergency and do more to tackle the climate crisis. Hopefully, your unanimous vote today will give kids in our global community not only a place to play, but an Oakville and a planet that remains livable for future generations to come. Thank you. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, sir. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Elgar.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate hearing the young voice with enthusiasm. But so you're saying right now our goal is to get to 20%, and you're saying we have to get to 40% by 2030. So what do you see us doing a lot differently to get there, based on the fact recently Doug Ford has torn out the electric charging stations at GO train stations, I understand. So we seem to be going the wrong way. So how's that going to, how are we going to get there with that kind of actions being taken now?
It's a great question, and I know that Doug Ford has been taking regressive actions on this issue, but we can only do what we can do, and we have to start here in Oakville. So there's stuff that you as councillors can do, there's stuff as we as individuals can do. I'm trying to do my part. I created this report. There's 10 actionable items. I worked with some people from the town to help create it. For sure, there needs to be a reevaluation of the town's, what the town is doing to see what needs to be done to reach that 45% target. If the steps are obtainable, then we must increase those targets. I want to work with the town to reach those 45 targets that the IPCC has set, and we really must, no matter what Doug Ford is doing.
Now, you also read recently that now scientists are saying we will not be at 1.5 degrees. We will be more than that with whatever we're doing at this point.
There are all the time a bunch of reports because the climate crisis is fluid. We can't let one report saying that what we're doing isn't good enough stop us from doing anything. We have to do everything in our power to reach those targets and pray that that's good enough. I'll be 48 by the time it's 2050 and we feel the effects of climate change. I know that we're going to be on the business end. We need to do everything we can do right now and hope that it's enough. It's late, but we can never say it's too late because then we've already lost.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I hope we get there. It's going to be a struggle, and I think people are not talking about global warming anymore. At least they're calling it climate change, because it used to be the old thing, the joke, well, I wish there was a little more global warming on a cold winter day. But thank you. Don't stop. Keep going with what you're doing. Thanks a lot.
Councillor Robertson.
I so enjoy your passion. I love seeing high school kids in action, doing what we need to be reminded of sometimes. I just wanted to ask if you're working with the school boards, the two school boards at all, say students that drive to school and how they're getting to school every day. Are they taking transit? Are they driving their own cars? Are mom and dad driving them and dropping them off every day? So if you're the generation that is going to be the primary actors, are you working with the school boards too?
Yes, this year I was a student senator, so I represented Abbey Park to the Halton District School Board. I was also the Oakville Regional Director. Through that position, I was able to work with different students, and one of our goals was seeing how we can reduce our footprint. I know myself, I carpool with 3 friends in the morning because we live pretty far away, and that's our way of reducing our emissions. I know that I worked with my student council president to see how we can reduce emissions this year. So I got involved myself, how there is still work to be done, and I know next year a focus of the Student Senate will be reducing Halton's, through the school board, their emissions. There is work to be done at our school. A lot of people take their cars to school, and part of the reason why is the busing. It takes an hour for me to get home using my school bus. That just doesn't make sense when it would take 10 minutes if mom or dad were to drive me. So there is still work needed to be done, but there are people doing this work.
Thank you. And I think that, like your number targets, even if you create number targets and every school had a number target of, hey, we're going to see 15 less cars in the parking lot in the first 6 months. You know, you have number targets too. And I think that'll be great to come back and
Right.
say, look, we're meeting it. So, you know, you adults start meeting it too.
Yeah, there would be a lot of opportunity for student council presidents to get more involved. I know there's a campaign for that. That was a campaign issue at our school. Some work that we're working on is there's no green bins at our school. Just a lot of stuff goes in the trash. It's not just the carbon emissions, it's reducing the footprint. And I agree with you, there's a lot of work that
Good. It'll
needs
be
to
a
be done.
partnership. That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Gittings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming out. You're very persuasive. Councillor Robertson covered a lot of what I wanted to ask you about. With your persuasiveness and your abilities, I'd love to see you come back to us in a year's time in terms of waste reduction and the food bins and everything else, because I think if all of us have to do what we can, and with your talents, I look forward to hearing back in terms of the effects that you can change. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Lishchyna.
Thank you, Your Worship. Andrei, that was an excellent presentation, so I do commend you. And of course, going back to your earlier days, you're getting better. So I will challenge you on a couple of issues, though. So you yourself had indicated that it took a 15-page report to get here today. But I did not hear from you any commentary about the 15 pages, which it's just a significant amount of work that's been done since 2005 to actually make a comment about what's been happening in our town, because actions speak louder than words, if we're going to use different phrases. So can you make some comments about the projects and the strategies that the town has used for the past almost 15 years to actually take action?
Right, thank you. So I did meet with Suzanne, and we had a discussion about what the town has done. I'm very pleased to know that all the new buildings the town is building are carbon neutral. There's solar panels now at many of the community centers, at Glen Abbey Rec Center by my school. There's solar panels. I know that we're investigating electric buses. I heard that there's about 6 or 8 electric buses that the town has. Tree planting, the town is working with nonprofits as well, such as the Halton Environmental Network. I met with Lisa Kohler from there. There's the retrofitting programs. There is a lot of stuff that the town is doing. I didn't have the opportunity to memorize all 100 or so opportunities. However, I will say that, speaking to the report that we did make, we kind of looked at what the town did and what some other municipalities are doing. And what we did is myself and some other high school students from across Oakville worked on a report with what feasibly the town can do more based on what some other jurisdictions are doing as well. So yes, the town has been doing a lot of amazing work.
So you would agree that action is being taken on climate. So I understand the concept of the emergency and the crisis, but this didn't happen yesterday or the day before. This happened 15 years ago with the forethought of the people. I wasn't here. I actually came to the town at that time. But the forethought of the people who sit in these chairs, who actually took action through the years, through their strategic planning to make sure that we're on the right path. And I agree with you. I mean, the more trees we have, the better. Green space is huge in Oakville. So that's why people move here. Now, LED lighting, you would have seen some of that recently just by if you're walking in the neighborhoods about how much light pollution and how much energy we were taking. So there's a lot of action that's been taken, and I just don't want to lose the sight that, we declare an emergency, but nothing's been done in the past, which is absolutely not the case.
I would just like to reply to that. Yes, the town has done a lot of work. You guys know of the work you've been doing. I know a couple other people in the community.
Did you mention any of this in your survey or the petition when you sent? Because, when I saw actions like, politicians are not doing enough in your comments that you presented here, that's not the case here in Oakville. So that's why, when you put out something and you get people to jump on the bandwagon without actually doing more research and educating them, that could also be a big disservice.
To reply to the point, and then just to continue on what I was saying before, the reason why I said we're not doing enough is because the town's reduction target, as it stands right now, is 20% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. The UN has said that that is not enough. And yes, we're doing a lot of work, but to go back to the point of the climate change emergency declaration, a lot of people don't know about the work that the town has been doing, and we need to engage them somehow.
So are you using this platform to educate them as well? Because I didn't see it in there.
Right, so through my Instagram and through updates that I've been sending out, I have been telling people how to get more engaged. And as I said, as soon as this emergency declaration is passing, 1,600 people are going to get an email saying, the town agrees with you that this is an emergency. What can you do now to fight this crisis? Because once it's a crisis, it becomes an active issue that everyone's working towards to solve, not just the town. Right now.
But you agree we didn't need the word crisis or emergency to start all the action that's happened in the last 15 years. Would you agree with that?
The work the town has been doing. There's 211,000 people in Oakville, and those are the people that we need to actually be doing more as well. So it's the town and
well,
the people.
I look forward to your participation. Thank you.
Mr. Andrei, thank you very much. And you ended on a wonderful note, indicating that, it is something that all of us have to work on if we're going to get anywhere. The town can only reduce its emissions. It can't reduce yours or anybody else's. And if the town made its emissions zero tonight, no change on Oakville's footprint would be registered because the town's activities are such a small part.
1.3%.
So we can lead, but until people will follow, it's going to be slow going, which is I think what Councillor Elgar was suggesting. So Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I want to congratulate. That was a truly inspiring speech. I hope you're going to clip it off the YouTube feed from tonight and share it everywhere, because everybody your age and everybody my age and every other age out there needs to hear what you had to say. I agree with what you're saying. Communications is key, and I do believe honestly that the declaration of an emergency is critical. I don't believe by any measure that you were here chastising us in any way whatsoever. I think you were raising the alarm through this venue and through our resolution and the work that we can do to communicate to our community. So I want to thank you for that. You've truly inspired me to go forward and to do even more. So thank you very much for that. I look forward to seeing your social media footprint grow as you continue to evangelize this very important topic.
Thank you for having me.
Anyway, thank you very much,
Okay,
sir,
thank you.
Mr. Andrei. I thought it was very, very good of you to end on the group note. There's 211,000 of us. We've all got to get involved. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
The next delegation is Aki Knaka. And this too is on item 4 on this evening's agenda. Welcome, Ms. Tanaka. Council looks forward to your information.
Do you have a presentation
No, I don't. I'm just speaking.
already?
Let's just point the microphone in her general direction.
Here?
That's all we need, yeah.
Is
Thanks.
that good? My name is Aki Tanaka. I've lived in Oakville for 32 years. I live in Ward 2. I'm a retired engineer, and in my paid working life, I worked in the nuclear power business. In my personal life, I am the mother of 2 young men, a wife, and a lifelong plant lover with a special interest in native species. In March of this year, I took climate training with Algar in Atlanta. I urge Council to join with other municipalities in Burlington, Hamilton, and Halton Hills in declaring a climate emergency. I ask you to imagine an Oakville in the future where public transportation is convenient and carbon-free, where there are many more affordable electric vehicles and a good charging network, where our new neighborhoods use 100% renewable energy, where our older buildings have been retrofitted to become energy efficient, where entrepreneurs have developed sustainable businesses and technologies right here in Oakville. Imagine an Oakville where residents bike and walk along attractive pathways to get around, where we all have the opportunity to live, work, go to school, and shop locally, where we handle waste, recycling, and composting on par with global best practices. Imagine that we have connected natural systems and abundant native plants where native wildlife has a place to thrive. Imagine that the air we breathe is clean and we can swim in a clean Lake Ontario. Oakville would truly be the most livable town in Canada. This kind of vision requires that we make transformative change. Currently, we are not headed towards the Oakville I just asked you to imagine. You are likely aware of the October 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Findings, the Environment and Climate Change Canada report released in April of this year, and the first comprehensive global report on biodiversity released in May. These reports all point to the fact that we are in a climate crisis. I do not have to tell you any more about the effects of climate change. You see it daily on the news, and we are experiencing it ourselves in Oakville. I know that people in Oakville are anxious about climate change, but do not know what to do. I suffer from this myself. I would like to add that millions of people in developing countries are now trying to emulate our energy-intensive lifestyle, and we are rushing to buy the cheap consumer goods that they produce. But what we all are doing is unsustainable, and we all carry responsibility for changing what we do in Oakville. There are 3 things I would ask of Town Council. The first is that Council encourage Oakville as a whole to adopt challenging targets and actions to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. I urge Council to become familiar with the excellent work being done for Oakville's Community Energy Plan. I have attended all the public meetings of the task force so far, and I have been impressed with the thoughtful discussion taking place between the town, local businesses, educational institutions, utilities, developers, private citizens, and consultants. The second thing I would ask is that the town of Oakville lead the way in encouraging its residents to look at other ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions aside from energy use. Changes in the way we eat, the way we use air travel, how we deal with food waste, and so on, can contribute to greenhouse gas emission reductions. Positive changes can also be made with green infrastructure, like native trees, to sequester carbon and manage stormwater. Appropriate green infrastructure can also improve the biodiversity of the Carolinian zone in which we reside. Finally, the declaration of a climate emergency is a step forward for awareness, but I urge Council to take thoughtful and persistent action following the declaration. This action must be consistent with an emergency. You, our Council, have the power to take meaningful actions, and I, as a resident of this town, am counting on you for this. The reality we now face implores us to act, and I believe we all want to be on the right side of this when we are asked by others, what did you do? Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions? Thank you, ma'am. Oh, excuse me, Councillor Lishchyna.
Thank you, Ms. Tanaka, for your presentation as well. Could you make a comment on anything that you've read in the report today with respect to what the town has been doing for the last 15 years?
I think the town has been progressing on making changes towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is the most important thing that we have to think about. I think things have stepped up into another dimension with the community energy plan. I'm really encouraged by that. I think we just have to keep going forward, and we have to try and look at the problem from many different angles.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very pleased to hear your remarks about the community energy plan work. And lest there be any confusion, Council is aware of it, and we appointed Councillor Longo to that.
Yes,
working
and
group.
I've met Councillor Longo at the meetings, and but I understand you will be receiving a report in January 2020.
Whenever
and-
the task force produces.
So
We're
I'm
not,
just-
it's not our project. It's wonderfully, it's a community-based project. And as I think is obvious, everybody's got to get on board. So there's a chance that that'll make a difference. Thank you
I
very much.
totally agree with you. And I think, I hope I have said in my speech that we all, and I don't mean just you, I mean all of Oakville, have a part to play.
That's what I heard you to say.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure you knew that the council is aware of the community energy plan.
Okay,
So thanks very much for your information.
you're welcome.
The next registered delegation is Lisa Kohler from the Halton Environmental Network, and she's also delegating on item 4.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, councillor, staff, and community members. I appreciate the opportunity to delegate this evening on the motion to declare a climate emergency, a motion in which I support. My name is Lisa Kohler. I'm the Executive Director of the Halton Environmental Network, otherwise known as HEN. HEN propels programs in our community like Halton Green Screens, Greening Sacred Spaces, and we partner to support programs like Oakville Ready and the Halton Climate Collective. I have been working in the environmental sector since the 1990s. I have a degree in environmental policy and analysis, and I wish I could stand here tonight and tell you, environmentalists or a specific group have the solutions. Unfortunately, I can't. True climate change will take a collective approach from everyone. Climate change should not be a political issue. It's a humanitarian issue. Climate change is about our values. It will take everyone to lean in to affect change. Every day, I hear from faith-based leaders, business owners, students, seniors who are speaking up and leaning into action for climate change. A few of those individuals are here tonight, and I thank them for their commitment to ensure change. I've spoken up in Burlington and Halton Hills for their declarations, but tonight, it's a bit more personal for me. I've had the pleasure of growing up in Oakville and reside here now with my family. Oakville is a wonderful community. I feel lucky to live here and work here. I'm also very proud of the leadership of this council and the town. The town has taken environmental issues to task. You have leaned in to many actions. From protecting green space, creating bylaws to ensure our air quality, filing applications with the Ontario government about the Environmental Bill of Rights, establishing an adaptation plan for climate change. You've partnered for climate protection. You've invested in solar power. And now you are leading the way again with the Community Energy Plan. I'm honored to serve on the Community Energy Plan Task Force. I sit alongside Councillor Longo, Sheridan College, Siemens, Mattamy, Ford Motor Company, Oakville Hydro, Enbridge, Halton District School Board, and many others. The work that we are planning will drive change. It will lead to climate action. I feel this collective partnership and the goals that we are setting will be transformative. In fact, we are looking at ambitious goals of 50% by 2030, with 100% by 2050. The work of the Halton Climate Collective is a collective group that is anchored in our community. The HCC, as it is known, is comprised of leaders and engagers from the town of Oakville, the town of Halton Hills, the town of Milton, the city of Burlington, Conservation Halton, Halton District School Board, Halton Catholic District School Board, Conservation Halton, and HEN. These leaders and engagers from the HCC are working together to drive collective action as well. From the town of Oakville, Tricia Henderson and the Office of Government Relations and Sustainability are true partners. Right now, we are launching a behavioral survey to find out what actions community members are taking, what are their barriers, and how can we support them with the required change. This year alone, we have completed numerous outreach events, created a Did You Know campaign, we're building a website, we're working on establishing living laboratories to embed our community with change. We're working on a youth conference in Oakville to ensure youth are engaged and responsible for driving mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. We are doing our part. We have secured all outside funding, and we are ensuring that our work and our deliverables will be effective. The work of Government Relations and Sustainable Office and that of Suzanne Matter, Tricia Henderson, and Denise Ergin should be commended, and I thank them for their partnership, their dedication, and their drive. I hope this motion will reinforce their work and ensure their capacity so that Oakville remains the environmental leader in the GTHA and in the province. Our climate is changing fast. It's widespread. It has profound consequences for all living organisms. The science is clear. You know this. You're working on the issue. You are being the change. The challenge is ensuring the public understands the change is needed, that they feel empowered, and that they're ready to make the changes in their daily lives. We are all busy. We hear a lot about climate. We know the community feels somewhat overwhelmed. They truly need leadership. They need you. They need you to declare an emergency and to talk to them about the challenges and the opportunities. They need to hear from you so that they know we all must work together. Our future generations are depending on it. I promise you, HEN will do our part. We will continue to look for opportunities. We will continue to look for fundings. We will engage the community with education and outreach. I hope you will go out in your community. You will highlight this motion in your newsletters. You will talk to the citizens in your wards about this issue. Again, the message is clear. Climate change is real. We all need to lean in. We have no planet B. This is your opportunity to declare an emergency, to highlight the issue, have an honest dialogue, discuss tangible actions that will drive true change for our community. Thank you very much for the opportunity to delegate.
Thank you for your delegation. Other questions? Councillor Gittings?
Thank you for joining us this evening. Ms. Kohler, you mentioned, first of all, thank you for what you're doing for the community. I see you out and about at schools in different places on a regular basis. You mentioned that your comment that what is being done is transformative. Anything else that you have an ask for at this point?
I think the number one thing we can all do, and this is not about one council. It's not about one group. This is about all of us together. We all must talk about the reality of climate. It is overwhelming. It is challenging to talk about. It's hard. It's difficult. But by getting out there and just having honest dialogues is the best thing we can do. By also giving hope and talking about the opportunities. We have great opportunities. The CEP is a massive opportunity. I sit on another CEP for another community. Pales in comparison, sorry, but it does, to the work in Oakville.
That's all right to say that.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Councillor Gittings. If we can all just be truthful, if we can talk about this, if you can highlight the behavioral changes and things that people can do daily, these actions aren't overwhelming. Little tangible actions repeated daily by everyone will affect change. That's what I'd like everyone to do.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned that you were looking for feedback from the community. How can we assist you with that?
So hopefully today you all received a survey from someone from the HCC in Hen. That is our behavioral survey. It has a QR code embedded within it. You can scan it on your smartphone or your device, and that will go to the behavioral survey that the Halton Climate Collective is launching. So again, this is a survey that we're looking for in community that really highlights what are people doing right now, what are the actions they're doing, what are some barriers to their action, and how can we help them and better support them. We need to know that as the Halton Climate Collective so we can get out there and really embed change. At the same time, we are doing a community greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the whole community of Halton, and we are working with scientists from the University of Waterloo on how to then drive that change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gittings. Councillor Longo?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Lisa. And also thank you to Aki and Andrei for actually having the courage and taking the time to come here and the leadership to be able to come and talk about this. I think as we heard, the town of Oakville can only do so much. So I'd like to ask you, Councillor Gittings talked a bit about it, but community engagement, are there things that we can personalize to help people understand small things they can do in their life that can actually affect change and affect the climate? Can you help with your network to be able to disseminate that information so people, it personalizes it, so they can actually say, hey, we're all in this together. How can we do that? And what are the things we can do? Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Longo. So on the back of our postcard right now, we have 5 tangible actions that the Halton Climate Collective comprised and developed specifically for the community of Halton. But not only do we have that tool, but the town of Oakville, Suzanne Matter and her team have also created a really great postcard that have 10 actions that community members can do. These actions, again, they're not overwhelming. They do not cost a lot. These are about efficiencies. They're about being effective, and they're about working together. Simple actions like instead of setting up a carpooling system for your kids or your after-school programs, or walking to the grocery store just one time, maybe once a month, and seeing how that goes for you, or reducing your consumption of meat, have a meatless Monday. There's so many little tangible actions that if we all start leaning in collectively together, that will be of supportive nature and a supportive change. But again, with that CEP, that's where the really big transformative change can happen. Because having those strategic partners like Siemens, like Sheridan, like Mattamy, like Ford Canada, these are big, tangible actions that we can take together, as you know.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm a big fan of what you do. So what my question is for council, and the mayor and I have spoken about it already, is if you would do a training session for us as councillors to demonstrate and role model what we can do to reach out to people, because I think if we put it in our newsletters, and if we just, I think if we just keep disseminating information, it just goes over and they just kind of skim it and we don't make a big dent. So it would be great if you could do a training session with us about how we should get out and role model this and get it out in our communities. So if that would be okay with you?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I would absolutely love that. There's so many actions that we can all take together, and that's what this is all about. So I really would appreciate that opportunity. And then to show the community that you are the leaders, that you are role modeling this, that will really help everyone get on the bus together.
And as well, I want to do a little plug as we're talking about a student of mine from Oakville who has developed an app. And if you're interested in apps, it's called Random Acts of Green. And it's a great community app. And so I love that it was developed by an Oakville person, and it's common sense and it's fun. We could do ward challenges against each other for simple acts, and there are point systems, and we could have a lot of fun with this. I think that's part of it. We need to make this not seem like it's overwhelming drudgery, that there are, fun ways to really tackle climate change.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lishchyna.
Just a really quick, thank you so much for coming today and presenting. I really learned a lot there. Could you just state again where people could go to the behavioral survey? Is it online somewhere?
It is. So we're developing our website right now. Unfortunately, it's not ready to launch. It's hard when you work with a collective group to make sure that everything looks a specific way. But we have been putting it out on our social media. We do have a Did You Know campaign that we do loop into it. We can also send it directly to you if you didn't happen to receive that email.
Yes, I was just looking for it. I don't have it, but just for social media purposes, where would people find you?
Through the Halton Climate Collective. It is pinned to our page. We are looking for an ambitious 10,000 people to fill out our survey. So this is working in all 4 communities across Halton. And we are really trying to reach that goal by the end of August. What we're appealing for is if you take the survey, if you could pass it on to 10 friends, if 10 friends could pass it on to 10 friends, then we'll get it done. As well, if you're having any special events in the community, if you wouldn't mind welcoming us for a pop-up event, we'll pop up. It's fresh, it's fun. The survey takes less than 2 minutes. It's on Mentimeter. Honestly, it's great. It's fun.
You got me at the 2 minutes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kohler, for your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton.
The next delegation is Hart Jansen, the Council of Canadians Halton chapter, also on item 4. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information too.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a 2-slide presentation, and I also have a 1-sheet handout. I have 20 copies here. Sorry, what was your name again? Hart Jansen. Here we go. I would like to encourage the town of Oakville as the most, to continue to make it the most livable town in Canada, but not at the expense of the planet or those most vulnerable. The town has made some positive initial moves regarding the environment, but sadly, as the mayor has noted, these have not had a significant impact on the total greenhouse gas emissions in Oakville. A report prepared for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities entitled Act Locally, the Municipal Role in Fighting Climate Change, states that municipalities directly or indirectly control 44% of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see the breakdown. Oh, am I in control here? There we go. And I'm going to just test my laser pointer to see if it works. Hardly. Okay, I will not go there. So this table, you can see on the left-hand column in the blue, the top several rows show what is in direct control of the municipalities. And in the case of Oakville, because we have two-tiered government, it's really only the municipal operations subset, and you can see the red outline. We see 4.9 megatons of emissions. Again, this is a national total, but I think we can take it as representative of a typical municipality in percentage terms. So we see the total greenhouse gas emissions across the country in the very bottom right shows as about 388 megatons. So the municipal share is around 1%, the directly controlled emissions. So, you know, as usual, the mayor is right. You know, they're just, even if the corporate facilities in Oakville emitted 0 greenhouse gases, it would make a 1% difference. So what I would then suggest is that we have to focus on the areas of indirect control. So the ones, the areas outlined in green. So this is the area that I am strongly encouraging the council not to throw up their hands and say, well, the residents have to do it. Well, yes, but you have to help them do it. You have to show the courage and the creativity to implement programs that meaningfully help the residents in reducing the emissions in their houses primarily, and also to help Oakville businesses reduce their emissions. And I have to agree, if Andrei Adam, the first presenter, intended to say that at the municipal level, our council hasn't done enough, I have to, if that was his intent, I have to agree. Council can do more. And I don't mean to scold or criticize. I want to inspire you, cajole you, persuade you, and even dare you to implement programs that will help the residents and businesses to reduce their emissions. So Canada is among the highest greenhouse gas emitter per capita in the G20. And one could readily make the argument that on a per capita basis, Oakville may have the highest greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. This is not an enviable record. And on this basis alone, we should be declaring an emergency. You might ask, what data am I basing these assertions on? What are the per capita greenhouse gas emissions in Oakville? My understanding of data collected by the town shows that Oakville's per household electricity and natural gas usage emits 6.6 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. I don't have the official numbers at hand, but I would ask council and I would ask staff, do you have the numbers? I would suggest that council and staff need to do their best to compile them and publish them, these numbers and related numbers, at least annually on the town's website. A problem must be clearly identified and measurable before the public can be expected to help solve it. If we are to declare an emergency, I would suggest that such a declaration would be only symbolic without specific targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and collection of local data to measure progress against such targets. And I hope that the Community Energy Plan has ambitious targets and programs to help residents achieve the targets, not just PR, but real help, and a credible monitoring program. So let me discuss 3 examples where the town has the ability to effect a substantial reduction in greenhouse gas emissions without very much spending. So the three examples are residential heating and cooling and energy efficiency, number 2, community energy, and number 3, reduction in use of fossil fuels in industry, construction, and landscaping services. So residential heating and cooling. The town can help residents lower their emissions and save money by implementing a program, either directly or via Oakville Hydro, to finance the retrofit of existing housing to become more energy efficient in many ways. And I won't go through the list of how you can make housing more energy efficient. There's a dozen ways you can do it. But suffice it to say, it can make a real difference. And the key stumbling block for most residents is the lack of out-of-pocket capital to finance the retrofit. So I was part of a mayor's advisory group 9 years ago on third-party financing for energy efficiency retrofits. And as an indirect result of that work and work from the Suzuki Foundation and other municipalities, there was a change in provincial legislation that made it easier to affect third-party financing for energy efficient retrofits. I'm disappointed that that Oakville and other municipalities haven't jumped on this opportunity. And finally, on the energy efficient housing front, I'm also disappointed that there are no incentives whatsoever to build an energy efficient house in Oakville that I know of. And at the risk of blowing my own horn, the house that I built 6 years ago, that my wife and I built 6 years ago, emits about 500 kilograms of greenhouse gases a year. So that's less than 10% of the average Oakville residents. And again, no incentives for other people to go ahead and do that. On the community energy front, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was led to believe that there was an intent by the town / Oakville Hydro to cover the suitable commercial roofs in Oakville with solar panels. And when a serious local group that intended to finance and build a community-owned solar facility using a commercial rooftop approached the town for guidance, it was rebuffed, given that, quote, Hydro will be covering every roof in Oakville. Sadly, outside of a couple of small pilots, I'm not sure that anything substantial on the solar power front has been done. The town should be actively courting partners to establish numerous community-owned renewable energy facilities in Oakville, even if only in anticipation of more enlightened provincial legislation. Finally, on reduction of fossil fuel usage in industry, I'll just give one brief example before my time runs out. The town could regulate highly polluting two-stroke engines that are used for leaf blowers and other lawn maintenance purposes. That would be a very effective and relatively straightforward means of reducing those emissions. And if I would, I beg the indulgence for 20 seconds more to announce that on a very closely related note, there's going to be a Halton Town Hall meeting on a Green New Deal for Canada tomorrow night at QE Park. You should all have received an invitation. So come to QE Park tomorrow at 7 p.m. and give your input on how to structure a Green New Deal for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen, I'm sorry. Are there questions? Councillor Elgar.
Well, just so you know why no one from council will be there tomorrow night. We have another council meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, just so you know, okay?
Okay.
Now, on the issue of residential buildings, you are aware that Doug Ford gutted part of the building where we we were going to have to put electric charging stations in garages going forward, and that is now wiped out. We can't even enforce that anymore. You aware of that?
I'm not aware of the details, and you'll notice that I didn't address the personal and freight transportation issues. I hope that other people have bright ideas on how the town can solve that very significant issue. But yes, I am aware of the increased challenge in the current environment.
Now you're also talking about that we should be funding for retrofitting houses, but we put it on the taxpayer to help at that point.
Sorry, what I meant was the town needs to facilitate third-party financing. The town isn't going to finance anything. The town is setting up an administrative program that allows residents to borrow money and pay it back via their hydro bill with the energy savings that result from their retrofit.
Okay, well, I need a few more details on that, I can tell you.
Right, so I think maybe we need to review what happened at the Mayor's Advisory Group 9 years ago, and the provincial legislation.
Yeah, where it stands today.
Right.
Now, the other thing, the biggest thing, there's no question, next to the oil industry itself, are tailpipes. That's one of the biggest causes
Yes.
of the climate change, is tailpipes. So, like, not too many people probably came on the bus to this town hall meeting tonight either. Like, we're all at fault in that regard.
Some of us drove our electric cars.
Okay, or hybrids. Okay,
Right.
that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that there's so much impact is because of the big highways we've got very close to us and the tailpipes. And, I'm sure you read the Clarkson Airshed study from about 10 years ago. But
Yes.
We definitely have a lot of work to do. And it doesn't seem like the general public or the provincial government is helping us a lot here. So we're doing the best we can. Maybe we can always do better. And the third-party financing for retrofitting a house could be interesting. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen.
Okay.
The next listed delegation is Pauline Watson, and also appearing on the Climate Change Emergency Report, item 4 on the evening's agenda. Ms. Watson, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to delegate at the council meeting tonight on the subject of the climate change emergency. My name is Pauline Watson, and I've been a resident of Ward 3 for 27 years. I'm a semi-retired professional engineer with over 35 years working in the area of energy production in Ontario. Since retiring, my interest has been sustainability and climate change. I did a master's in engineering and public policy and was trained as a climate reality leader by Algar in 2014. I would like to speak this evening in support of the Climate Change Emergency Report. In the background section of the report, the significance of declaring a climate emergency is said to be to expedite the prioritization of the climate crisis in a government's strategic vision and plans for a community, and to build awareness and capacity to initiate critical and accelerated action. I think the key words are prioritization of the climate crisis and initiate critical and accelerated action. The Climate Change Emergency Report outlines the town's strategic approach over the past 14 years to dealing with the climate change emergency. Initiatives include a timeline, tracking, and reporting progress, strategic memberships, and highlights of corporate action. Despite all the initiatives listed in the report to address the climate change crisis, the business-as-usual scenario for the town's greenhouse gas emissions does not come close to a trend that would meet national or global targets. The population in Oakville is increasing, so not surprisingly, energy usage in our town is not decreasing. Traffic congestion is worse. New communities are being designed and built centered around automobiles. New housing developments are not offering low energy use options. Less than 0.1% of homes in Oakville have rooftop solar panels. Bus transit usage is not significant. Bicycle paths are not extensive enough to provide a viable option to driving. Electric vehicle adoption has plateaued and carbon sinks, such as the tree canopy, have been eroded. Climate change is already causing flooding of our shoreline. The Community Energy Plan, of which I am a public at large member, will produce meaningful recommendations for future reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from energy use in Oakville. However, this plan only addresses energy use and does not consider emissions from organic waste, including food, and removal of carbon dioxide from the air by green infrastructure. Time is running out to get on track to meet global IPCC targets, and all municipalities, including Oakville, need to step up to take more decisive action. As the climate change emergency report shows, town operations are responsible for about 1% of Oakville's emissions, and significant action has been taken in this area. LED street lights, plans to green the fleet, installing solar panels on buildings, and so on. However, as the pie chart on page 15 of the report shows, emissions from residential sources, heating and electricity, account for 26%, transportation 48%, institutional 5%, commercial 8%, and industrial 12%. Residents have some control over emissions from electricity and gas use, as well as transportation in their personal vehicles. The Climate Change Emergency Report says that residents must do more to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and offers 10 ways of doing so. However, changing habitual behavior is difficult. We are conditioned to act in a certain way based on current infrastructure and existing policies. Drivers for behavioral change include knowledge, awareness, financial incentives, and guilt or a sense of duty. Green behavior is a shared responsibility between the public, government, and industry. Environmental problems have been created by the state through infrastructure such as cities and suburbs designed for the car, a dependence on fossil fuels, and the goal of increasing GDP. Government policy will be key to solving the climate problem. I'll give some examples. It is recommended in the report that we buy or build energy-efficient homes, but new housing developments in Oakville over the past years or so have not offered this as an option. Provincial incentives to reduce home energy use, such as energy-efficient windows, have been discontinued. However, there are some ways the town can reduce our energy use apart from the provincial government. At meetings of Quest, which is the Quality Urban Energy Strategy for Tomorrow, it's mentioned in the report, over the past 6 years that I have been a member, cities across Ontario and Canada have been showcasing their energy-efficient communities and district energy systems. Oakville has not been leading in this area. Currently, none of the big renovated or new homes in my neighborhood have solar panels or any apparent energy efficiencies. The opportunities to make new neighborhoods more energy efficient and more walkable, and to encourage renovations and rebuilds to meet or exceed current building code requirements are crucial actions the town can take. With respect to transportation emissions, electric vehicle purchases could be encouraged by town actions. Following the elimination of the provincial incentives, a more widespread and visible system of charging stations could encourage people considering an EV purchase. And I also note that the charging stations at the GO stations have been removed. The Climate Change Emergency Report says we should reduce idling, yet drive-through establishments are still permitted and traffic congestion is increasing. The report says we need to increase cycling as a means of transport, but existing bike paths are typically not separated from traffic, making cycling unsafe for a large portion of the population, including children and seniors. As a result, most children are still being driven to school. There are too few bike paths, including a lack of bike routes joining North and South Oakville under or over the QEW. Many commercial malls still do not provide bike racks. The book Drawdown says that reducing food waste is one of the most effective ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I believe that food waste in our green bins is successfully composted, so is not a source of methane. But what about pet waste? Are restaurants composting their food waste? The waste management system needs to effectively deal with excess food and organic waste to avoid methane gas production, which is a much worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Certainly, Oakville residents need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, but the town needs to step up to remove barriers preventing behavioral change. Oakville has made some progress in slowing the rate of future climate change, but it has not been nearly enough. A climate emergency declaration and follow-up actions would require more radical and accelerated change in how our town infrastructure is developed that would help to save our planet for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Watson. Questions? Thank you very much for coming.
No questions?
The next listed delegation is Herb Sinek and Michelle McCollum on behalf of Sheridan College, also on item 4 on this agenda. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Very good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Council. Herb and I are delighted to be here this evening to delegate on behalf of Sheridan. Herb is our Director of Sustainability and I'm the Associate Vice President for Development, Facilities and Sustainability. As you know, Sheridan, we're leaders in sustainability in Canada and we're here today to join this important conversation about climate change, to support the staff report and to commend Town Council and staff for the leadership you have demonstrated over the years and the continued commitment that you have to addressing and taking action around climate change. I'm going to provide some high-level updates and comments, and then Herb is going to talk a bit more, specifically about the work that we've been doing about Sheridan and about our partnership and how together we can go forward in ensuring a sustainable future for Oakville. So first of all, I'll share some important updates from Sheridan. So we're very excited that we have a brand new strategic plan that's hot off the press. I'm delighted to let you know that our president, Dr. Janet Morrison, will be here later this year in the fall to talk about the strategic plan. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag with all of the excitement that that will bring. However, I would like to share with you that there was a real consistent message throughout the engagement that we did with our students, with our faculty, with our staff, and with the broader community members that we consulted with. Sustainability and the importance of connecting with the community and how we support each other really was first and foremost in our plan. And Janet will share more about that with you later this year. I'm also pleased to let you know that Janet has recently been invited to serve on a national advisory committee, and that's going to look using the framework of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to lead impactful change across the post-secondary realm in Canada. And this recognises that students and communities served by institutions across Canada increasingly realise the urgency of pursuing the vision of peace and prosperity for people and for the planet. Another key component, and Herb and I are super excited about this is something that we're leading on, is we're developing a new campus master plan. So hopefully in a few years to come, you're going to see a brand new Sheridan. We recognise the importance of our leadership as an anchor institution in this broader community, and we want to demonstrate that through our built environment. So we've hired a fantastic consulting team, Urban Strategies, who are going to lead us through a year-long process where we're really going to envision the campus for the future. So we're super excited about that. We also have a brand new mechanical engineering degree program. So we currently have 24 baccalaureate degree programs. So this adds another one to that, to 25. And what's really exciting about that is it's really leading edge in sustainability. So Herb and his team actually had a lot of work into this program. So that's going to be starting this September and is already waitlisted because of its popularity. So we are delighted to partner with Oakville and with the broader community, and especially around the community energy plan. And I'm very proud to be one of the co-chairs of the Oakville Energy Task Force, along with John Matheson from Hatch. And that's really, and thank you, Councillor Longo, for your leadership on that committee as well. It's got fantastic support from town staff. We're hugely thankful to them. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Herb because he has a lot more to say than me, and we're 6 minutes to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I want to start by saying Oakville really should be commended for its consistent work over decades on the climate file, really consistently articulating and realizing its environmental vision. And we see it again tonight in really taking bold action on the existential crisis of our times. So applause for that. Now, my team has an opportunity to interact with municipalities around the world. And I could say without a doubt that Oakville is correctly placing its priorities around energy and climate. So you're on the right side of this story and history. However, as each of you would acknowledge, as municipal staff would acknowledge, to honor that kind of commitment would require from us collectively to mobilize leadership, policies, programs, directions from stakeholders across our entire community. This is not one thing that any one group can do. So if we're to be successful in doing so, what we will actually do is collectively create a really radical transformation of our community, and one in which our community as a whole is empowered. And that's actually the thing that really brings Sheridan to the table, because transformation's really in our DNA. This is what we get excited about. And for years, we've been working very hard to try to peg our own actions to the right side of this table. And you'll see it in our reframed, rearticulated strategic plan. You see it in our campus master plan. And when those forces are paired, Sheridan and Oakville, we're really putting the wheels in motion on important pieces of what the community is going to need to realize its future potential. So our partnership in the community energy plan is actually right now bringing together major stakeholders from public sector, private sector, institutions, industry, community, and we're unpacking all kinds of data and information about the energy systems, the carbon sources in our community, and we're crystallizing the big moving pieces that we're going to need to reinvent our low carbon, clean energy future. So here's a couple of snapshots of what that looks like in the last couple of minutes. This graph shows us that right now our community collectively spends about $600 million on transportation fuels, heating fuels, electricity, and roughly 80% of that, more or less, will actually be flowing to actors outside our community. And if left unchecked, that grows to somewhere between $2.6 billion to $5.3 billion. And we have a choice. We can view that both as a threat, or we can look at it as a tremendous opportunity. Perhaps it's an opportunity for economic growth. So this diagram of cash, which flows from the raw fuels on the left side to the end uses on the right, actually helps you see the opportunity in here. The gray bars, top and bottom, are actually wasted energy. They are inefficiencies in our system. This is energy we pay for and never receive. So our tasks, as we move forward, are to use less in all of the sectors, from transportation to buildings, but at the same time also reinvent our energy systems to make them more local and to bring more of those dollars back into our community, where they can lend to jobs and economic growth. Now, if we can do that successfully, we do have pathways to successfully achieve those goals that we're talking about in our resolution. It is, in fact, possible to make this happen. To do so requires a total reinvention of policies, systems, energy use, our land use forms, and these are things we're going to have to work on as a community. So this is not a small task we're facing. However, what we do see, it is possible. And having it be possible is at least a first step for us all. So I would just like to point out, as a final point, that really what we need to do as a community is work on mobilizing our social capital and our financial capital towards the sustainable future we're envisioning collectively here. And we look forward to carrying out that conversation with you all in the months to come as we're working through all the ways we can enlist our community leaders and stakeholders to a consistent path to success. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Let's go change the future.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's always delightful to hear from people who understand that you have to be the change you want to see. Are there questions for the delegation? Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel and then Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm learning lots tonight, so I appreciate all the speakers. Could you speak a little bit to what Sheridan's doing around transit? I understand that you had to cancel a shuttle that goes from our campus to others. And I think it's an example of the struggle that we face as a town in terms of you want to do the right thing, but there is a cost implication. And yet you have a large body of students who are taking cars back and forth every day.
So, you know, as you know, that there was a decision from the province that we're working on different solutions in terms of, it specifically involves the shuttle from campus to campus, that particular scenario. So we're looking at different solutions and, you know, to see what options are. It was unfortunate that decision was made. However, we still have a duty to our students to make sure that they can effectively get across our campuses where they need to. So that one is very much work in progress. But Herb can talk more about what we're doing in terms of supporting our students in different modes of transit.
So we are active participants in Smart Commute, which provides options for carpooling for our students, which is an excellent source of support. We happen to have 2 campuses, and unfortunately Oakville is a bit off the path, but 2 of our campuses happen to be at major transit hub points. I consider that an opportunity at the same time. It means that we have a nexus of transportation services and transit that should be able to adequately fill in some of that gap that now the shuttle buses have left. The other thing we're really working on in the concept of the campus master planning is what do we do to radically rethink how people arrive at campus and how they actually participate with the campus. In a way, if you begin to envision our campuses as living academic communities, where the people who are attending our programs, who are participating in the education are actually there, are actually at site, or are able to access remotely, or have basically other ways to attain the educational services we offer, then those become alternatives entirely to treating the campuses as destinations. So I think longer range, our vision really has to be how do we radically rethink the value of having people drive to a campus to acquire education.
Well, I look forward to you implementing some of those thoughts. Thanks very much.
Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Could you go back to the graph about 3 slides back? That's it. Oh,
This one?
that one there. Do you think it might help if you put in where we were in around 1970 and show how the trajectory was going up and what you're proposing where we have to get? It's a bit, that might shock a few people. And
probably would.
I think that's missing from that slide. I think it could have a lot of impact to show we're on the wrong track and have been for a number of years.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Good suggestion.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you could send it to us also, if you would do that. I think that's a good one. And you can see the tailpipe is the big thing here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your information and the promise of the graph. That'd be delightful. The next listed delegation is Karen Brock, the president of Oakville Green, and she is appearing on item 4 on this evening's agenda as well.
I'm not Karen Brock.
Karen, how you have changed.
Unfortunately, our president could not make it tonight. So
Well, she was working very hard today planting a butterfly garden.
Yes, I turned up there and she told me you were there. Yeah. And so this is her submission on behalf of Oakville Green Conservation Association. Biodiversity and climate change go hand in hand. You can't deal with one alone without addressing the other. Nature does not work that way. Oakville Green Conservation Association has a history of protecting trees and green spaces in Oakville. We have worked collaboratively with the town and community partners to enhance our forests, riparian areas, valleys, and open spaces. We are a small organization with a strong action bias. We are on the front line of seeing what is happening in our forests, streams, and natural areas. We see firsthand that climate change has brought invasive insects like the emerald ash borer and invasive plant species like the dog strangling vine, garlic mustard, and buckthorn. Our urban forests are threatened by these species that outcompete natives and have thrived due to climate change when warmer winters no longer kill off these pests. We also see the constant struggle the town has with development pressure and actively participate in site planning, committee and council meetings to protect the pernicious nibbling away at our natural infrastructure from private interests. Working with the town of Oakville and other levels of government, we see organizations that are strategy rich and implementation poor. As you receive tonight's report, I urge you not to leave it as just another report in the file. Put some money behind it. We feel that the town of Oakville has done a good job of creating a climate action policy, a stormwater management policy, the Oakville biodiversity strategy, and the urban forest strategy, and is working on its energy plan. Tonight, you receive the climate change emergency feedback from staff. However, without a meaningful budget and a concrete multi-year action plan behind these policies, we will not be able to turn the tide. Smart local investments in climate change can have a highly positive return on investment. These investments will have to be multi-pronged. There is no one easy silver bullet to fix this issue. Oakville Green strategy is planting, advocacy, and education, all of which work at a local level to improve our environment. Green infrastructure is the only investment you can make that will increase in value over time versus depreciating like all other town assets. This is Karen. I'm not an accountant, but the town's budget dedicated to control and remove these invasive species are insignificant line items compared to the epic battle we must wage against the effects of climate change. Stephen Hounsell of the Ontario Biodiversity Council says, "We appear to be strategy rich and implementation poor, and we need to change that. We are in the midst of not only a climate crisis, but also a biodiversity crisis with a very clear deterioration of wetlands, grasslands, and woodlands. The Great Lakes are hardening and there is huge habitat loss. Bottom line is healthy ecosystems sustain healthy people and a healthy economy." He says humans are the problem, but they have the solution too. He outlines 4 strategic directions: engage people, reduce threats, enhance resilience, and improve knowledge. Oakville Green is doing all these 4 things, but we all need to join forces to accelerate our impact. How do we achieve our policy goals? Policy needs to lead to action. Timing is important to fund Council's response to climate change. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's only going to be more expensive and take much longer to fix later. As a town and nation, let's dig deep and re-examine our values. Let's set ambitious targets and create timelines, but most of all, let's see the money. I borrow the phrase, we would be left to cook in our own juices if we left climate change, environmental protection, and food security to the province. Local action is more important now than it ever was. Define our values, then be certain strategy, policy, and action are in line. We must work together to do better, and our organization, Oakville Green, is here to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Enver Domingo for you, everybody. I neglected to introduce you at the top.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good to see you. And are there questions for Mr. Domingo? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
The next listed delegation is the Reverend Dr. Mervyn Russell. We last heard from him leading us in O Canada, and now he will lead us in a new chorus. Welcome, Dr. Russell. We look forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Worshipful Mayor, honorable councillors, fellow citizens, as the Mayor has indicated, I'm Mervyn Russell. I'm speaking on behalf this evening of the Anglican Church of the Incarnation, which, as some of you will know, has a pollinator garden, has a water cleansing garden, and is the first public building in, I believe, the region of Halton to have gone thoroughly geothermal in its heating and cooling systems. As many of you will know, I'm an old preacher. And for many years, my assigned role, it seems, has been to encourage humans to honor God and to help others. And today, and for the immediate future, that means for me, pleading with people to act urgently, determinedly, and thoroughly to promote achieving two major tasks, global tasks. One is the prohibition of nuclear weapons. There is no greater threat to the sustaining of life in all its vitality and variety than an exchange of exploding nuclear weapons. Such disaster has nearly happened accidentally a number of times. Our luck cannot hold out forever. The other is the transformation of our global economy from one whose most fundamental and lasting result is the spreading of death to an economy whose ongoing and consistent consequence is the flourishing of life. Our present global economy has two fundamental fatal flaws. First, it is energized by burning carbon fuels, which cause global warming. And second, it has as its main purpose the production and enjoying of large amounts of possessions, wealth, ease, and entertainment as widely and as quickly as possible, thereby irreversibly devouring huge quantities of the planet's resources and at the same time causing huge amounts of waste and pollution. And as a result of these two flaws, we are destabilizing and degrading the mutually life-supporting systems of our uniquely provided planet in an irreversible manner. We are indeed facing an unprecedented global crisis. Like many of you here, I have grandchildren, 5 girls, 1 boy. If all of our grandchildren and all of the grandchildren of the world are to enjoy a stable, safe, satisfying life, then all of us, each individual, every institution, including this one, this council, must commit not only to the reduction of use and the wasting of carbon-produced energy, particularly oil and gasoline, But we must also commit concurrently and irrevocably to the thorough replacement of carbon-based energy with renewable forms of energy, above all in heating and in transportation. My generation has made this mess with our unthinking acceptance of the commercial insistence upon continual consumer growth. Now my generation must help make the transition. Fortunately, our children and our grandchildren are already leading the way. This transition will involve some financial cost. But as with any investment, there cannot be financial gain without initial cost. In any case, who can put a value on breathable air, drinkable water, verdant vegetation, fertile soil? Who can estimate the delights of having the sun, the wind, and the rain as our friends rather than as our enemies? You politicians, and all politicians today, must be the advocates and the legislators for this transformation. The horizon of the transformed future is bright, and it is overflowing with promise. So, let us, like immigrants entering a new land, continue our journey towards it with resolve and with hope. Let us renew nothing less than the life of the planet. And let us begin tonight by moving, supporting, and passing a climate emergency resolution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Are there questions for Dr. Russell? Councillor Lishchyna.
Reverend Russell, thank you so much for your presentation as well. I'm glad to hear of the Anglican Church doing so much work in their backyard to mitigate climate change. Do you have any comments about the direction the town of Oakville has made so far based on the report that you would have read over the last number of years?
There's obviously a lot of work that has been done. And one never gets everything done, or as much as one would like to get done. But I think, as also been indicated this evening, there's a lot that can be done to build on what has been done. And I think that's the important thing now. Yes, we recognize with respect what has been done, but let us resolve to do even more.
So you have seen the strategic plan for 2019 to 2022 under the environmental about transitioning to a low carbon future and then obviously making our environment much more resilient. So it's still in the works, so it's never done, like you said.
I have read the plan, Councillor, yes, I have read the plan.
I thought you gave a very good answer, Dr. Russell.
I have been around these kinds of meetings a long time, man.
Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. Council, the next listed delegation is Ted Hagen from the West River Residents Association, and he's here on traffic calming and speed limit review, item 9 of the Community Services Committee meeting of June 17th. Welcome.
Well, thank
we
you
look
all for
forward
welcoming.
to your information.
Thank you. Thank you all for welcoming me here tonight. I have to say I'm a little overwhelmed about talking about traffic when we've had all of these issues. So if I look a little deer in the headlights, I agree with most of them, and but here I am talking about traffic. Yes, I'm Ted Hogan, President of West River Residents Association. I've met many of you as chair of We Love Oakville, but tonight I am talking about traffic calming and the speed limit review recommendations that you'll be looking at tonight. I first of all have to apologize to Councillors Duddick and Chisholm. I have been constantly pestering and harassing them about this for about the last 4 years. But I do want to thank them for their ongoing support for this initiative. Speaking specifically about West River to start, since I moved here about 20 years ago, whether this is good or bad, traffic speeding and other issues around that have been the #1 issue in our area constantly. And I think any of the mayor's been at some of our AGMs, as have Kathy and Ray, and there are always, half the questions are always about traffic and speeding. So I have to say that I'm very glad that this is finally coming before council, and I hope you make the right decision on it. In the last few years, traffic, especially in our area, has been changing. Increased traffic on Kerr Street, the congestion, the new condos, all the construction that's been happening on Kerr and Spears, and the construction to come with the railway track changes have all changed traffic patterns. Our neighborhood is quickly becoming a shortcut for people from outside the neighborhood. Here are our concerns. We have 2 daycares, an elementary school and a school crossing, several school bus pickup and drop-off spots, many elderly and children using the church for daytime and weekend activities. There's the Lions Dog Guide facility with people and dogs training around the area regularly, as well as halt and support services in the Oakland centers. There are no sidewalks on many area streets. And as I said, Queen Mary is becoming the shortcut for traffic, especially in morning and evening rush hours and delivery vehicles. On Kerr Street, from the railway tracks to Rebecca, there are 5 stoplights. There's only 1 left-hand turn lane. People are trying to parallel park on Kerr, and if you've been down there lately, it's a mess. Compare that to Queen Mary, which is parallel. We have 2 stop signs. So I can't blame people for wanting to take shortcuts, but I didn't think we were an arterial route. This is having an effect on our entire area because as people are seeing people speeding up and down Queen Mary, they're speeding everywhere in our neighborhood. The present speed limit is 50. The town criteria for traffic calming measures is having about 50% of the traffic going over 10 kilometers over the posted speed limit. So in essence, the speed limit, according to the town criteria, is 60 kilometers an hour on our residential streets. That's too high. We do want to sincerely thank Council for considering our area as one of the test areas, and we look forward to working with you. Looking at the bigger picture, there are already lower speeds in many school zones and selected Oakville streets. I have never heard complaints about any of those that don't involve speed bumps, and I'm not going to mention speed bumps here. I know that's a headache. I think it's imperative that Council seriously consider 40-kilometer speed limits on all residential streets. That's the one ask. Municipalities across the GTA have moved or are moving in this direction, bringing effective traffic calming into residential areas. There are very few municipalities that aren't moving in that direction. I certainly don't know of any that are speeding them up, except our provincial government, but I'm going to leave that alone as well. Excessive speeding is a factor in a majority of traffic accidents. Reducing traffic speed to 40 kilometers will make our community safer, and on the theme tonight, a little greener because they will use an awful lot less fuel. Obviously, enforcement is a key issue, and without police cooperation, little will work as desired, but I do know that discussions are ongoing with Halton Regional Police about how they can work with that. I have to honestly say that until recently, we were frustrated with what appeared to be an almost obstructionist approach from the town to our efforts to reduce speeding and traffic. Most answers we were getting from the town about our concerns seemed to focus on what couldn't be done rather than what could be done. This is why our residents are extremely pleased about the initiatives that are before you tonight. As residents, we have to set realistic expectations. We know it takes time to change bad habits, and we've certainly heard about that enough tonight following on that theme. And we realize we are far from being the only Oakville neighborhood that have these concerns. But there's no time like the present to begin these changes. It seems like we've got a continuity in a lot of themes tonight. West River fully supports your effort to make Oakville safer and trusts that you will do what's right. Kudos to you for all these moves. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Council, the next listed delegation is Jessica Cauchi, and she is appearing on the item 2 on the agenda, and this is the Autism Spectrum Disorder Funding and Services item. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton. Good evening, councillors. I know you're sort of getting on in the evening, so I appreciate the time to have everybody's attention. As some of you probably know a little bit about, and some of you maybe know much more about, our provincial government under the Ministry of Child and Social Services this year made some major changes to the way funding for autism services is administered. I see a lot of nodding heads, so that's a good start. I am a behavior analyst. I run an ABA Center for Children with Autism in Oakville. I've worked with kids with autism and ABA for 20 years. And when I was thinking a little bit about what I wanted to speak about tonight, the easy thing for me to do would be to come and talk about why these services matter so much to so many families. It's easy to hear those stories, and there's a lot of those stories to be heard, some of which I suspect you'll hear a bit more about tonight. I chose to do the more difficult thing and talk about it from a business owner's perspective. I run a very small agency. We employ about 23 people. We provide services to about 35 or 40 children, teens, and adults on the autism spectrum. We are nothing compared to agencies like Erin Oak Kids that also has had a lot of media attention this week around very large-scale layoffs. For those that may not have heard this, they have laid off their entire autism services program, just short of 300 people, with the intention to rehire back on contract just less than half of those staff in the fall. These are people that have dedicated their entire career to working in what is an inspiring and incredible field to get to work in, but also a challenging field. 9-month contracts don't attract good staff. That's just sort of a fact. I work in the private sector of this, so as in many cases, there is a little bit of discord sometimes between a private provider and a publicly available provider as well. But this has huge implications for me and my staff as well. There are services that were provided by places like Erin Oak Kids that were necessary before they got to our doorstep. These are services now that my staff are going to have to pick up the slack for doing a little bit of, because these are families that are sort of lost in the dark at the point that they're getting them. Either that means that my already stretched too thin staff are stretching a little bit thinner, or we're presenting some of those services at an additional cost to families, neither of which are good options for us, to be very honest. Our staff also provide a great deal of student supervision and student placement opportunities. This field has grown immensely. When I did my board certification in 2009, I was one of less than 70 behavior analysts in our country. As of last year, I am very pleased to say I was one of just under 700 in Canada. That gets there from providing supervision of students. We take placements from undergraduates, college programs, master's level programs, all the way up. And those are additional things that are placed on staff. Nobody enters this field for a great love of earning a lot of money. I run this business. I arrived here in my 7-year-old car with a cracked windshield and no air conditioning. So if that tells you anything about me as a business owner, it's not great, right? What they benefit from as staff is feeling like they're making a change in people's lives. And to do that, we need to be able to provide good quality service based on what kids and teens actually need. I'll give you a little bit of an example. If I'm teaching a child to play a train set with another child, a little, 3 or 4-year-old kid, they need to be able to attend to that activity for more than 10 or 15 seconds. They need to be able to communicate what they want, play with that toy appropriately, tolerate other people playing with that toy in a way that might be different than how they may have very strong feelings about playing with it. They need to be able to ask for things from other kids, take items from other kids, share items with other kids. There's a lot of skills built into that, and that's one activity. So for some kids, they may have some of those skills already. For some kids, they may have none of those skills. And some of those kids will learn those skills really quickly. Some of them are going to take hundreds and hundreds of times practicing that to learn to play effectively with one toy. If you take out one piece of that, it all kind of falls apart, right? You can have all of those other pieces, but if you can't tolerate somebody else playing with that toy a different way than you play with it, the rest of it's all for naught. You haven't got an effective skill out of that. And so the problem with the way that the province is presenting this is that's not taken into consideration. For my staff, that means that they're now teaching a portion of what we know that kids need to be learning. And we're doing that knowing full well that it's not setting kids up to be successful. It's not keeping those skills the way that they need to be going. We're setting them up knowing that I'm teaching you all these skills, but you can't really handle anybody else touching your trains, so probably this isn't going to matter in your life. When you have people that work in a service industry, their benefit is to keep a hold of the fact that they have done something meaningful in somebody's life, and we're going to lose that. These are decisions that I could spend 10 times over my 10-minute allotment talking about the clinical need for needs-based therapy, the ethical need for needs-based therapy. But there's a big financial need for it too. I had an opportunity to sit at a round table a couple of weeks ago with some of our local provincial representatives. And I talked a little bit about what some of the long-term solutions look like for kids. In the media and in the stories that we hear, we're hearing a lot about why therapy is important for kids that are in crisis, kids that have very, very, very severe needs. And I have many of those stories that I can share. We hear a lot about the education system and how the education system fails kids that have any type of other learning needs. And kids with autism certainly fall well within that. But I have a lot of kids that are doing pretty good and that are doing really well. I had the opportunity to share the story of a couple, and I'd like to share them with you as well. I work with a 10-year-old girl who right now we are teaching to tolerate wearing sanitary products and managing them herself, so that by the time that this is needed in her life, she can do this independently. And that's partly because, help in the washroom is kind of humiliating, but mostly because there's a lot of research that looks at people with any type of disability being in private, closed-door situations with frontline staff makes them extremely vulnerable to sexual abuse. So I want to set this kid up so she's in less of those situations. I have a 15-year-old boy who we're teaching how to flirt with girls, which is amazing. I have a great job. But also, it's because the way he shows girls he likes them right now is he touches them, their arm, their cheek, and that's not so bad right now, but you know what happens to 18-year-olds that touch girls that they like? They get arrested. I have a 17-year-old that we're teaching job readiness skills to. Because again, he wants to have a job, and he should be able to have a job. But more than that, having a job correlates with much lower instances or much lower risk of mental health concerns down the road in life, including things like anxiety and depression. These are the changes that the province is making means that I can't help any of those kids. And those are only one skill in one part of their life that they need. They're not in crisis, they're okay, but they can't learn those skills in the school system, they can't learn those skills at home, and they can't learn those skills in $5,000 a year. So these are extremely financially short-sighted decisions that the province is making. when I first made a leap into owning an own business, I really struggled, to be very honest, with being a business director and a clinical director. And the reason I struggled, I learned, is that it's really hard to make clinical decisions based on money. I also own a business. I understand that there's not unlimited money for anything, and that while my operating budget is significantly smaller than that of the province, it's the same kind of thing. I understand that there's limits to things. But these are decisions that need to be made in a much clearer clinical consideration. What we ask of the council is just support. Speaking up to the province, speaking up to the public, and learning a little bit more about what some of these decisions will mean for members of your town, and for members of your community, and speaking up to say this is not okay. We may not have great solutions yet, but working with the people that do have good solutions and good ways to move forward, and just being a little bit outspoken that these are decisions that as a whole and as a community we're just not comfortable with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for information. You've inspired a couple of questions here.
I will brace myself.
Councillor Duddock.
Thank you, through your worship. Thank you very, very much for coming this evening and shining a light on something that many of us can't appreciate just from looking outside, looking in. But I really believe that the whole purpose, what I'm hoping is with council's support, doing exactly what you were saying, showing people that you're not alone in this fight and advocating at the province. I guess I'd be interested to know, when you said you sat down with a roundtable or discussion with the various representatives, was there an acknowledgement that maybe they weren't as aware as to the effect of the funding issue on the frontline providers and for the families?
Yeah, for sure. I think there certainly is. I have also been able to speak out about a little bit more of a clinical need, and I chose not to do it that way tonight because I think that the other side of it is the less comfortable side to talk about. It's less comfortable to talk about money. It's less comfortable to talk about business, and those are things that are not getting discussed as much. I think everyone is very grateful to have the opportunity to speak at roundtables and in many other formats, including this one. And I think that voices are certainly being heard. My experiences in various places have been that some people are very much a yes, we understand, and we understand the issues and the concerns, and we hear them and we're on your side. For some people, there's a lot of aspects that probably didn't occur to them until that point. And so I think both ends are very important ways to get information disseminated.
I guess the other aspect, and you hit upon it throughout your presentation, was the fact that people who assist or are trying to assist families do this as a calling. It's not, as you said, you're not making reaps of money. Nobody goes into this for that. It's that benefit that they've made that one child succeed where normally they wouldn't be. I know that Councillor Gittings and I are quite involved with dog guides, and speaking to the programs there with the autism, they've had to close out their waiting list because they are just oversubscribed with people trying to assist. And yet, when talking to some of the trainers, I understand that sometimes even going to do the placements in the school, because it's across Canada, sometimes the actual educators fight them on the dogs and modifying the programs to assist the child and not being able to get it, how they're going to get the best for the child in the system. So
there are certainly a lot of large-scale systemic issues in treatment and education across the board. One of the biggest challenges at this point is that if we change the way that people are funded and we are not funding based on what kids need to be successful, is you're not even going to hit the point where you're up against any of those bigger systemic barriers, because you're not ready to be in school. You're not ready to learn in those more inclusive and frankly cheaper environments. And so we're now sending a whole bunch of kids off to school this fall and in January that are just simply not ready to be there. And anyone can imagine then what cascade of, implications that has across the school system as a whole.
I know for one that several of us attended the Erin Oaks opening, and we're so excited to see such a positive addition to the community. And there were so many people there from surrounding communities who were saying, finally, somebody's getting it. And then to hear that 271 upwards to 300, you've got a building with nobody being able to perform what they were meant to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Over here, Councillor Sanju.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think everybody here on council gives you their hat off for the amount of work that you do and the kind of work that you do. I don't think it's an easy job, and I certainly am not envious of how much you probably have to put into it. So I thank you for that. Erin Oaks is actually in Ward 7. And that being said, I'm saddened to hear, as Councillor Duddick and I think many of other council members are, of the reduction of staff there. But I did have kind of like a side question. So you'd mentioned that you'd gone to the roundtable discussion with our local provincial representatives. Have you been able to get in touch with them or other people with the province to advocate directly, either yourself or other groups?
There has been much work from parents and professionals on various levels across the province, from large-scale organized protests to individual meetings with MPs and MPPs across the board. This is met with varying levels of success and varying levels of opportunity to get those points met, I think. There have also been many attempts from professional organizations. The Ontario Association for ABA is one of which. I have a little bit of information to leave tonight that looks at some of the very large-scale research that they've done on looking at evidence-based practices for teaching kids with autism. Those have been, again, met with varying levels of success in terms of opportunities to have those messages heard.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I think your presentation put a lot of color on the bones of the issues. You've obviously read the material that we've got in front of us in terms of the agenda item that we've got. Do you have any suggestions to us for improvements? Are you happy with the way it's been written and drafted?
I think that some of it is there have been movements forward in the province over the last couple of months that have changed a little bit. They are listening to some degree in terms of putting together some more formalized approaches to hearing people's voices. The province ran a series of teletown halls, a series of roundtable discussions, as well as an online survey gathering information from parents, caregivers, providers, educators across the board, and they now have an advisory panel in place to look at that information. I think that urges that any of the information, really honestly, that's coming from council that speaks to the fact that services need to be individualized for children across the board and based on what they need is more important now than it even was a couple of months ago when some of these changes took effect. It is really important, I think, to continue to put pressure on the province to say, we understand that you are revisiting this and looking at this, and the way that it is happening right now is not okay. So while you're looking at it, we're really optimistic that this will lead to good changes. I think I understand the difficulties in eliciting change on a provincial level with files as big as this. I have worked in this field since before there was any funding in Ontario. I have seen it change enormously over 20 years. Every change has come primarily from parents pushing back to the province to say, this is what we need. And these are parents that are exhausted and that shouldn't have to do this. So any support that is coming from individuals, that is coming from towns, that is coming from local municipalities that says, parents shouldn't have to do this. This isn't what we should have to fight for. These are services that children need to learn, to survive, to grow in their life. I think the overriding message is important, and the individual parts of it, I think are okay to vary a little bit by municipality. I think that's fine.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cauchi, for your information and your passion.
Thank you.
Council, the next listed delegation, sorry, Councillor Haslett-Deal. Excuse me, Ms. Cauchi.
Sorry.
We have a late breaking question.
I will come back.
So in the motion tonight, there's a statement that talks about to continue, I'll read the whole thing. There be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of Town of Oakville formally requests the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services suspend implementation of its proposed plan and continue to identify and advocate for a sustainable funding plan for families with individuals with ASD to ensure adequate resources for applied behavioral analysis and needed therapies. Would you agree that the message you sent tonight is to ensure appropriate resources? Because I'm just worried, given the government that you're having to deal with, that adequate will be not what you need.
Yes, I agree. I think one of the beauties of working in an applied behavior analysis field is we are very, very strict on objective definitions of what we'd like to see. I think that the general consensus and the feeling is, things like adequate are very broad, and that was part of the messaging that I'm sort of hoping to share in. There are people that need ABA therapy to make it through their week, to keep them safe, to keep their family members safe from harm. But there are also people that need it to keep them safe in the future. And so I do share some of your concerns that adequate is a little bit open to interpretation in a way that doesn't quite think as far in the future as maybe it should.
So I just, like, at the appropriate time, my hat's off to Councillor Duddick and Councillor Elgar. I think it's an excellent motion. I just would like to add that because what you said tonight, just no family should go through what they're going through without the appropriate support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much again.
Thank you for your time.
Council, the next listed delegation is Tova Ralph, also appearing on item 2, the Autism Spectrum Disorder Funding and Services. Welcome, Ms. Ralph. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me here tonight. I do have a picture that I wanted to give to all of you. Just talking about what is fair, and fair isn't equal to each person. So I just want to say good evening and thank you, Mayor Burton, for having me here tonight and the rest of the councillors. As you can tell, I might get emotional. My name is Tova Ralph, and I have a family member with autism. A parent shouldn't have to spend thousands of dollars on a psych ed assessment to find out that their child has autism, but not be given any services. To imagine their child is on a wait list for 2 years to find out their child is not. To then start from the very bottom of the list. Because a fax was lost. A parent should not go to school so that they can learn how to provide their child with ABA because their child knows they need it, but they don't know because no one will help them. I am also an EA, and I work with many children with ASD. Some children are lucky enough to have had services from the government, and some have not and are still waiting on wait lists. Some have found out that their substantial support is actually going to be minimized, and $5,000 is not going to get them even close to what they need, which means they will be entering the school system. And we all know that that could be having some devastating effects. I have many issues with the new OAP, but today I will focus on 2. The first one is that autism families aren't just asking for money. Money doesn't solve autism. Sending checks to families without guidelines, policies, and procedures, and where to go after they receive the funds is not very helpful. When a person is diagnosed with autism, most people are referred to specialists. But with autism, that's not the case. There are no service providers anymore who are coordinating these services. So parents are sent out not knowing where to go and what to do. They have had to become experts on what is going on for their loved one because they're trying to give their child or family member the best that their child can have. Taking away these resources and service coordinators and giving money to the families isn't what's going to make everyone happy. Because these people will go out and spend the money in the wrong places, and the government's going to come back to them and want to know why they spent their money with people who are not certified to give these services. 2 weeks ago, after sitting at one of the round tables with a bunch of local MPPs and some other MPPs from across Ontario, there were 20 plus parents, service providers, and educators. I left the meeting believing that the government cared and that they listened to us. And then last week we found out that Erin Oak happened to lay off hundreds of people. And then Lisa McLeod went online and tweeted about how this is a regular occurrence and something that happens with the growth of businesses. I'm here to tell you all this is not a regular occurrence. Getting rid of all of your staff and then hiring them back on 9-month contracts at less money without benefits is not the way to go. That's not what we in Ontario believe and what we want for our children. No parent should remortgage their home to give their child the services they need. They shouldn't be paying out of their debts. They shouldn't have to go into their life savings so that their child can thrive in everyday life. We are asking that everyone takes a minute. They listen and they learn and realize that we're here to work together. This isn't a situation. This is the next generation of children we're talking about. My second issue, and the issue that you all have a picture of, is that this picture, giving everyone the same thing isn't fair. As you can see from the illustration, giving all people at different sizes and different abilities and different levels the same thing isn't going to help them see over the fence. One person might need a ramp, another person might need 2 boxes, but what's equal isn't what is fair. So giving everybody $5,000 or everybody $20,000 isn't going to help it. It's just stretching out that nobody's getting what they need. Giving a person with level 1 autism, otherwise known as mild ASD, the same as a person who is nonverbal with level 3 ASD, on the very severe end of the spectrum, it just doesn't make sense. A person with level 1 requires a smaller scale and occasionally may need some more therapy when obstacles happen in their life. A child on the severe end could need many years of intensive therapy, and on the lesser scale for a few years. ASD is a spectrum, and that means it can change over time. What a child needs 1 year isn't going to equate to what they need the next year. Parents shouldn't have to do what they're having to do. They shouldn't have to become the specialists that they are becoming because they know that their children need help. Spending $80,000 a year for 2 years of therapy to give them a chance to be able to do basic things that all of us have the right to do is not a waste of money. There's actually proof showing that spending that money early on can reduce the costs of what the government needs to spend when these children are adults by 50%. So yes, short term, it sounds like a lot of money, but long term, think of the cost savings that will happen. Also, looking at professionals who are able to prescribe what these children need is necessary. If we give the child the tools, they will get what they need for life. A child doesn't stop learning at 6. They still matter, even if they don't get diagnosed before 6 years of age. They matter from when they were born all the way till when they're adults. The professional groups who have studied are the ones who should tell us what our children need. I think people should consult with those professionals who know, who have spent years and years trying to help our children to give them the best possible outcome. Autism isn't a one-size-fits-all. One child may thrive in a publicly funded school system with minimum support. One may thrive with a full-time EA. One may need a specialized school with professionals who are trained and aware of the needs that child has, where the child can get the therapy and education without one more transition in their day. Needs-based doesn't mean that the child, needs-based means giving the child what they need and not giving them what people think they want in order to succeed. Let's stop looking at autism as a problem and start creating solutions, and don't discriminate those that are most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Not a question, but just a comment. Thank you so much. I know how hard that can be. I'm a grandmother of an autistic child, and I know that it's not the dollar figure, it's the support that you need just to do, as you say, the day-to-day things that so many of us take for granted. And I did like your comment about having to be a specialist yourself, because I know from my daughter, she said several times, what do the others do trying to navigate this network? And for the longest time, I thought when I saw Aaron Oaks coming forward, that we were finally turning that corner and finally getting enough support provincially in the community to be able to support them. And now I just feel like the bottom's been taken out. I just can't believe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, the next delegation is Stacey Kennedy, also appearing on the Autism Spectrum Disorder Funding and Services, item 2 on this agenda. Welcome, Ms. Kennedy. We look forward to your information.
Thank you and good evening. And thank you for having us have the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Stacey Kennedy and my family has lived in Oakville since 2007. I am a mom who has been at Queen's Park on a weekly basis. We shouldn't have to do this. It's been 138 days since the government announced on February 6th that they would revise the Ontario Autism Program. This was a policy that was written for a communication strategy and not for the needs of children and youth in Ontario. 138 days and there's still no finalized plan in place. And as of late last week, not one child has come off the wait list. That includes my son. As they figure it out, children and families languish. Families with children and adults with autism thrive and survive with routine, transitions, planning, and scheduling. We are unable to do any of these things without the ability to plan emotionally or financially, given the upheaval currently taking place with the provincial government and with the Ontario Autism Program. Consultations for the revised autism program started on May 1st, 30 days after the program went live. The waitlist has been frozen since the fall of 2018. That freeze impacts our son. In short, the current government is dismantling the foundation of autism services and supports in this province with the revised OAP. It must come as quite a shock when the Aaron Oaks kids layoffs were announced last week. For families in the autism community, it was not a shock. It was exactly what we told the Ministry of Children and Social Services would happen, given the funding model they have created. Why? They have created more systemic barriers while spending more money than the previous government. They did it under the guise of families will have more choice. There is no choice for families if there are no services available. Due to lack of services, therapists, and accessibility due to cost. That includes private autism service providers in Halton Region who have wait lists for services or are no longer able to accept new children for services due to lack of therapists. Layoffs at Aaron Oak Kids is an example of this, and it creates barriers for families. No services equals no choice. The funding changes eliminate the assistance families get to navigate the challenging labyrinth of autism services and supports. For families like ours on a waitlist with no direct access to therapies funded by the OAP, that means accessing short-term supports like system navigation assistance, general information services after a new diagnosis, and crisis management for families who require emergency crisis services. No pay for access equals no services. You will hear the Premier say, we doubled the budget. Well, the devil is in the details. What he doesn't mention are the age and funding caps that have been put in place. At the age of 8, my son has made his greatest gains in the last 24 months. Under the Doug Ford Autism Plan, my son will not get needs-based therapy because he is over the age of 6, and there'll be caps on that funding. This creates significant financial barriers for families. This is unacceptable. No other diagnosis in Ontario has an age cap that limits access to health care. This is discrimination. The revised program changes have eliminated all community service options at places like Oak Kids. Families must now present a credit card to access the building for autism services. Oak Kids is now a private provider, even though our tax dollars paid for the building infrastructure and invested in the foundation of building services and therapies there. $163 million invested in 3 buildings in Oakville, Brampton, and Mississauga that opened in 2018. This is privatization. The government made the revised autism program changes in February 2019 with no program and policy analysis or proper community consultation, and they did not factor in the investments already made in the province against the changes that were being made. The government refuses to provide budget details, including addendums to the budget that demonstrate where the extra $300 million are coming from. Taxpayers don't know how this money is being spent, and there's a complete lack of transparency and poor communication. You will hear the government say 1 in 23,000 children are waiting. What they do not say is that this is an amalgamated list of children, some of who have accessed the OAP at some time. What they do not say is that waiting families and families in service have told the Premier, his cabinet ministers, and PC MPPs that families do not want the changes they have proposed, except for the introduction of other therapies, such as occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapies on top of behavioral therapies. The waitlist has been frozen since the fall of 2018. Our son was impacted by this freeze. This was discovered when service providers share the government asked that they freeze processing children into the program for therapies and not tell parents, which in turn did not allow families to find services elsewhere if they could afford it. Our family is not fighting for specific autism therapy in this province. We are fighting against the dehumanization of children and adults with autism and disabilities in Ontario and equitable and accessible care, support, and services. Age and funding caps are not equitable. I will say it again, no other diagnosis in the province of Ontario has an age cap to receive services in this province. Families currently accessing services through the OAP and those on the wait list need action to be taken now by the government and not in October. We want fiscal responsibility for this program. I will end by saying bringing up a child with autism is hard, not because he has autism and is neurodivergent, but because as parents, we are having to fight a system that forgets us and him, financially hits us, builds barriers around us, and stereotypes us and our children. Excuse me. My son is not hard work. Fighting against a system that excludes him at every turn is hard work. Excuse me for my emotion. Thank you for your time, and I hope you support the motion presented this evening. Even though I have tears, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I swear. This is an anger cry more than an emotion cry.
I'd just tell you that we all believe that you had the correct emotion.
Thank you. It's an anger cry more than an emotion cry. Please, especially if you don't have any autism families in your community that you're familiar with, if you have any questions.
Yeah, the Councillor Elgar has. I'll just say that this government has a hallmark of what I call fake consultation, and it hurts my heart to see you subjected to it.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Well, I just want to thank Stacey for coming forward tonight, and also thank you for taking the time to send little tweaks to the motion that we have in here that you would like to see changed. I think Councillor Duddick, we're going to do that. So what the tweaks you want, we are going to do, because you had more recent information than we had. So. Yes. Thank you so much, and thanks for getting engaged last week with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. As I've said, that there are parents across the province who have been protesting and advocating. There is a group of about a dozen parents who have been at Queen's Park on a weekly basis as we negotiate with our work schedules and our family schedules and our advocacy, so we can sit in the chamber and make sure that they see the faces of the people that these decisions are impacting, and it has made a very large difference. And we will continue to do that. We are constantly calling and writing and tweeting and advocating, and we will not stop until we get needs-based therapy that is beneficial for our children. So thank you for your time.
Can you just clear up one little thing for us?
Sure.
I understood, well, did I understand correctly that Ontario's new government for the people was going to distribute money to families on April 1st?
Yes. So
Did they?
They did not, no. So as I mentioned, I think at the beginning, the policy that was created that was announced on February 6th was never finalized. There was no plan in place. They felt that by, putting some structures in place where every family would get some money would be beneficial. And unfortunately, that backfired on them. And so they made a few tweaks. Initial programming had income caps in place. So if you made a certain amount of money, you could not get any assistance from any public services. And that was quickly kiboshed. And so they said that the program would roll out on April 1st. But what they didn't tell anybody, and which I found out through diligent research, is there wasn't any infrastructure in place to roll out the program that they had announced. So there was no staff in place at the ministry. There was no communication in place at the ministry. Most ministry information was received through Twitter rather than direct communication at the ministry from the cabinet minister at the time. So it was a PR policy rather than a structured policy. So those checks are in the mail, as we learned by Twitter in the last 2 weeks. They should be in the mail in the next week. So we don't know yet.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. If I may say that this is a policy that will be taught in political science classes in the future as what not to do for policy rollout. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Council, we need to turn now to the standing committee reports. In the limited time left. I'm going to separate item 9 from community services so that we can deal with a motion, two motions. I believe you have had, I'm counting on you having this in front of you. There is a need for a motion and a seconder that the recommendations of the Community Services Committee meeting be approved, subject to the separation of item 9, traffic calming and speed limit review. Councillor Dudek and Councillor Adams, may I put the vote? All in favor? And that is carried. Now, there is a motion by, I believe, Councillor Adams, and a second by Councillor Knoll. And Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to this and read it, please?
So this...
Because the council may have it, but the public may not.
That's right. So with respect to item number 9, the original motion that came from committee, which, Mr. Mayor, can you just confirm for me, we haven't actually dealt with number 9, right? We separated that, so we have all the items of 9 still to...
We are totally separated on 9.
We are totally separate. Very good. So in the agenda on pages 48 to 49, you'll see the original recommendation from committee. In addition to that, during the committee discussion, there was a request that I asked our staff of, which was to provide us with a draft resolution dealing with the automated speed enforcement or photo radar and what we should be asking the province to move forward with. That's what you've got in a 2-page memo to us, and I'm going to read that out for the public's benefit because otherwise the public don't get to see it. And that is, whereas on May 30th, 2017, the Legislative Assembly of Ontario passed Bill 65, Safer School Zones Act, authorizing municipalities to operate automated speed enforcement in community safety zones and school zones on roads under their jurisdiction. And whereas municipalities would be responsible for the implementation and operational costs of automated speed enforcement on roads under their jurisdiction, and whereas the bylaws designating community safety zones and school zones or implementing the automated speed enforcement would be enacted under the Highway Traffic Act, HTA, and would create HTA offenses. And whereas HTA offenses are administered through the Provincial Offences Act, POA courts, and any HTA fine revenue collected through the POA courts would be retained by the POA court program, not the local municipality. And whereas the Municipal Act 2001 authorizes municipalities to implement an administrative monetary penalty system for parking, licensing, and other bylaws enacted under the Act, and Bill 68, Modernizing Ontario's Municipal Legislation Act 2016, proposes to include authority for administrative monetary penalties to enforce the HTA, and whereas Section 21.1 of the HTA would allow for a regulation to prescribe persons authorized to enforce prescribed offenses through administrative monetary penalties rather than the POA courts, and whereas penalties for offenses arising out of enforcement through technology such as automated speed enforcement can be administered effectively and efficiently through an administrative monetary penalty system, and whereas there is extremely limited capacity in the POA courts to prosecute the potential volume of cases arising from automated speed enforcement, and the town of Oakville only has 1 half day per month of regularly scheduled POA court time to prosecute all matters, and whereas despite a variety of traffic calming approaches utilized within the community, speeding and the enforcement of speeding laws remain a significant concern in Oakville, be it resolved that Council requests the Minister of Transportation to continue working with municipalities and the Ontario Traffic Council on the swift adoption of the regulations necessary to implement automated speed enforcement, including the use of administrative monetary penalties by municipalities, and be it resolved that Council requests the Minister of Transportation in conjunction with the Lieutenant Governor in Council to make a regulation pursuant to Section 21.1 of the HTA that would allow for offenses created by automated speed enforcement to be administered through the administrative monetary penalties by municipalities, and for the Attorney General to support the necessary changes to allow technology-based enforcement to be administered through administrative monetary penalties by municipalities. That is the very long set of motion that I'd like to move forward with. And Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I think it would be best if we had 2 separate votes so that this additional memo piece could be, I'll say, clean and separated and therefore communicated cleanly, I'll say, without all the trimmings that we've got in the other 9-piece motion. I think that would be helpful.
The matter is separated on your request.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
I like the be it resolved part, fine. What I was thinking though, can we not send it, should we not send it to all the municipalities in Ontario? I think we should put the, staff.
I think that's an excellent addition. There is in fact a smaller group of municipalities that are involved in the work, I can't remember what the term is called, the working group on the issue.
Well, let's get the jump on them.
But we could certainly send it, to all, but I want to certainly make sure that group
and AMO,
is
of course.
highlighted.
Sure.
Anyone else? Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Councillor Adams, you have a little bit of work left on the rest of item 9.
So I move the remainder of item number 9, that's on pages 48 to 49. Is that what
Councillor Knoll, will you? Everybody's happy now? Okay. Councillor O'Meara.
I just have a question, as I wasn't in this meeting on item number 9 on the pilot project for the West River Residents Association. I'm guessing what's the, perhaps this is for staff, but what is the hope with this pilot project? At the end of it, what are we going to do, or what are we trying to gain with this pilot project at the end of it? And what are the timelines around the pilot project? How long are we going to look at that for?
Councillor Delegate.
I believe Joe Stephen will want to speak to it as well, but the rationale from our standpoint was that, similar to what you've advocated for in the past, lowering it to 40 kilometers, the discussion we had at CSC was not to do a blanket approach across the town because there was differing views as to whether or not it would be effective. So we thought, okay, Queen Mary, the West River have been very, very vocal, as I'm sure other residents associations have been as well. We've had the police involved. We've had traffic come out. We've had, as Ted had advised, AGMs where we've had town staff, we've had the police come out. It still continues to be an issue, and just putting up a political stop sign doesn't appear to be the solution. So we thought maybe this is an opportunity whereby we could capture some actual data, if it's framed properly, whereby if we do want to broaden the net, we can do so. But I'll defer to Jill.
Through you, Mayor Burton, the Highway Traffic Act has been amended so that we can set neighborhood speed limits by placing signs at the entryway to those neighborhoods to say that the speed limit's been reduced to 40, say in this case. It's a relatively new change. It's not something we've done here in Oakville, although some other municipalities are just starting to roll it out as well. So we would be looking to work with the West River Residents Association to set parameters for the pilot project. We want it to be measurable. We want to be able to understand how well the program has worked. And staff have said in the report and in other places that we feel just lowering the speed limit without complementary measures is not always going to result in lower actual speeds. So this gives us an opportunity to test that out. We need to make sure that we have before and after and during data so that we can really do a good evaluation of the process and be setting some key points. So staff have some ideas of the types of things we can evaluate, but we'd like to work with the neighborhood association to test that out and to set a good length of a program so that we can come back and report back with enough data, but not too long of a program that we're delaying any future initiatives that we might want to be looking at.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Councillor Duddick has mentioned, I'd like to see this on all residential streets eventually, and certainly would like to use this information then as we go forward. I know the residents probably all across the town are looking for some relief to the speeding on these streets. So I guess what I'm hearing from you then is we'll get the metrics, we'll bring it back, and then council can make a decision whether we roll this out across the town. Is that correct then?
Through Mayor Burton. Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Now, we need to deal with the Administrative Services Committee report. And for that, we only need a mover and seconder that the recommendations be approved. Councillor Longo and Councillor Lishchyna, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that report is approved. Now we come to the consent items. We have no confidential consent items. We only have one consent item, and that is the CN proposed Milton Logistics Report. And the recommendation is that the town supports the submissions of the Halton municipalities to the review panel established under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, and that the town supports the May 29th submissions for setting out the interests of the localities relevant to the CEAA and Section 98 of the Canada Transportation Act, as further outlined in Regional Report LPS 7819, that the town supports the future submission to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Review Panel for the proposed CN Milton Logistics Hub by the Halton municipalities of such further information, including oral and written presentations and remarks, as advances the submissions and matters relevant to the CEAA and Section 98 of the CTA, as also outlined in that report, that the town clerk forward a copy of this report to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Review Panel for the proposed CN Milton Logistics Hub, hub, and that the town clerk forward a copy of the report to the City of Burlington, Town of Halton Hills, Town of Milton, Region of Halton, Conservation Halton, Halton's MPs and MPPs, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and the Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for their information. And We need a mover and seconder. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you, everybody. So the next item is our first discussion item. That's the Autism Spectrum Disorder Funding and Services motion that Councillor Dudek and Councillor Elgar have brought and that we heard a little bit about earlier in the meeting. Councillor Dudek, I understand that you may have, well, I'm going to give you the floor, and then you can speak to your motion and/or make changes, whatever it is that you want to do.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate that. The suggestion, and I believe we have a copy at everybody's desk, that was suggested by Stacy was to include changes went into effect April 1st. Pardon me, it's after the sentence that says thousands of families currently receiving services could see drastic cutbacks. And the addition states changes went into effect April 1st. Systemic barriers for accessibility to services for waitlist families has also been put in place, i.e. pay for access, layoffs of therapists. And I would also include the suggestion from Councillor Janet Haslett-Thiel that in the paragraph that follows, that with ASD to ensure appropriate resources for applied behavioral analysis and needed therapies. And then the other thing that I caught at the very end was that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Premier Ford, and I understand it's now Minister Phillips, as opposed to Fideli, who I think would be the keeper of the dollar, so to speak, and that the others remain the same in terms of that. And just speaking briefly to it, thank you so much for coming out tonight, in addition to all the advocacy you're already doing. I'm ashamed. I'm just ashamed that anybody has to go through this, and that, as you pointed out, and rightly so, you're the only ones who have an age barrier put there that, to me, segregates them even more. And I just think that this government has to look long and hard and make the changes, not long-term, but as soon as possible. We don't have the luxury of time with children who are dealing with this and their families who, in addition to raising other children in the family and keeping full-time jobs and dealing with all the other things every other family deals with. As I say, I think it's an absolute shame that we in Ontario are treating these families this way.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Elgar?
Just, I'd like a recorded vote. I think that's important for something this big.
Councillor Haslett-Thiel?
I'm not sure if you'd agree to adding this, but it seems to me that when they have gone on, left Queen's Park, we should tell them to recall themselves and do what's right by the families.
I think that's an excellent.
Do you think we can, they're in the witness protection program, you know, it'll be hard to find.
And rightly so.
Get the marshals and go get them.
So you've made that change, have you? Yes. All right. Well then, are there other speakers? Well then, to be recorded in favor of the resolution, please rise to be named. Councillor Sandu, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Lishchyna, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Longo, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, Councillor Gittings, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Dudek, Councillor Robertson, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. I declare the resolution carried unanimously. So now, item number 3 is a fairly routine item. It's the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation Annual General Meeting and Business Update, appointment of auditors and appointment of directors and chair. And we have a presentation from Mark Maneri, our president and CEO of the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation. Mr. Maneri? Council is telling me they don't need a presentation.
I'm in your hands, Mr. Mayor.
Your faith and credit is so huge.
Well, you have the presentation. I mean, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Are there questions? Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for the opportunity of not giving it.
In point 4 in the recommendation, I'm wondering if I could just ask for clarification. Will you return to council with your findings? Point 4 references you being, the MDC being directed to commence the marketing and the development for those properties. I'm wondering if you could just confirm, will you return to council with your findings?
Yes, that is the intention. It will go to our board of directors firstly for a recommendation, and that recommendation will come to town council for endorsement.
So we'll have an opportunity to talk one more time about Brantwood School.
Perhaps several, but yes, at least one.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Knoll.
On a similar note, Public Works property, is it the same scenario? You're going to come up with a marketing strategy and come to council with suggestions on how that's going to work as well? Or?
Yes, that's correct.
That's great. Thank you. Look forward to that very much after 19 years.
Well, and I know there has been a lot of wonder about, what has this corporation been doing for the past year? But, I think we are now in a position to move forward full steam ahead.
Absolute confidence in you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Very, very similar, and I wondered whether in your presentation, did you talk in more detail? Were you going to provide any more detail about any of these properties and how they might be dealt with? I've read the report. I'm confident in the recommendations that are before us, but if there was some additional information on these topics, it would be of great interest.
Yes, I wasn't intending to speak in any great detail about any strategy or strategy moving forward, given the confidentiality of that information. But certainly, if you'd like to discuss any aspect of the Oakville MDC's plans going forward, I'd be happy to do that with you.
I guess my question is, was there additional information that you wanted to convey to us in respect of that, beyond what's in your written report?
At this point, no.
No, okay, then I'm happy. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All we need now, I guess, is a mover and seconder. Councillor Grant and Councillor Elgar, all in favor? Opposed, if any? I declare it carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Maneri, for your excellent presentation and your good work. I now need to call your attention, Council, to the Climate Change Emergency Report. And the recommendation is that the Climate Change Emergency Report be received and that Council adopt a Climate Change Emergency Declaration Resolution, which several councillors have labored long and hard over. Where do you want to go with this, Council?
I can move to.
Well, Mr. Longo, Councillor Longo.
I'd like to move.
Councillor Longo is moving the recommendation and the motion as you've been provided it. Councillor Grant.
Obviously, recorded vote for this, please.
All right. We've been sitting a long time. We probably need the up and down exercise. Councillor Adams.
I'm not sure if the public knows what this motion says.
Well, I'm counting on Councillor Longo to read it.
And maybe it could be read out for the public's benefit, because I think we've heard a few people who have an interest in it.
I'm counting on Councillor Longo to read it. Councillor Longo. Took a sip of water to clear his reading voice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to also thank Mayor Burton, Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Gittings, as well as town staff, Suzanne Matter and her team, as well as our community partners. So whereas the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has determined the need for a significant and structural reduction in carbon emissions in the next 11 years to avoid further economic, ecological, and societal losses due to the climate change crisis, and whereas Canada is, according to the Government of Canada's April 2019 Changing Climate Report, experiencing warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world, with northern Canada heating up at almost 3 times the global average. And whereas the infrastructure failures linked to the climate change crisis could cost Canada $300 billion over the next decade unless we change the way we build and move people, goods, and services. And whereas local governments are at the front line of taking actions to manage the worst impacts of the climate change crisis by creating low-carbon communities and calling on residents and senior levels of government for a more urgent response in both personal choices and behaviors and governmental policy and operations. And whereas the town of Oakville has already experienced consequences attributed to the climate change crisis, such as the 2019 record-setting high lake levels, shoreline erosion, and flooding at our parks and trails, the ice storm of December 2013, and the effects of emerald ash borer and other invasive species at our local forests. And whereas Council has adopted key objectives in the Council's strategic plan of 2019 to 2022 to create a climate change crisis resilient community and transition to a low carbon future. And whereas the town of Oakville understands that climate action and low carbon transition also represents an opportunity for economic stimulation and job development opportunities in a low carbon economy. And whereas the town of Oakville is currently developing, in partnership with Sheridan College and the Oakville Energy Task Force, a community energy plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Oakville and advance climate action. And whereas the town of Oakville recognizes many local community groups and organizations are already taking collective action on climate change, now therefore be it resolved that the town of Oakville declare a climate emergency for the purposes of deepening the Oakville community commitment to protecting our economy, environment, and community from climate change, and that council and staff urge the public to immediately increase the priority of the fight against a climate change crisis and apply a climate crisis lens to the plans and actions of the town of Oakville's public, and that staff are directed to report annually on climate change actions and update the climate change strategy to address the operations of the corporation of the municipality and identify the public's role in the climate crisis and the actions the community can do to fight climate change, and embed a climate crisis lens into the town's asset management program, and incorporate climate change crisis policies in livable Oakville, and increase action and ambition for the town's climate change crisis-related activities, and finally, include performance metrics to track progress and timelines for achieving key deliverables, major milestones, and a strategy to report back publicly on progress of municipal and public efforts. And I'd request there be a recorded vote.
Thank you, and that's seconded by Councillor Gittings, in case anybody was wondering. Councillor Gittings, would you like to speak?
Have I ever missed an opportunity? I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your support, and Councillor Longo. Since 2005, Oakville has been a leader in municipal climate change action. Our policies, master plans, programs, and initiatives are making a real difference and will continue to do so. We call on our residents and businesses to continue and accelerate their reduction efforts as well.
Thank you. Are there other speakers? Then to be recognized in support of the resolution, please rise to be named. Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Gittings, Councillor Haslett-Deal, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Longo, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, Councillor Lishchyna, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Sanju, and Mayor Burton. I declare the resolution carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Council, the next item is the expression of interest in the Audit and Accountability Fund initiative recently announced by Ontario's new government for the people. And I think it's important for the public to know a bit about this, and I would ask Ms. Sully if she would give just a bit of an explanation for where this is coming from and what it's about. And just as she's going to the podium, Council, I have a motion from Councillor Grant to go past the hour and a second from Councillor Duddick. It's not debatable. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everybody. Ms. Sully.
Okay, through you, Mayor Burton. The province announced this program in late May. As many will be aware, they have asked municipalities and other transit partners to look for efficiencies and cost savings. They have put out a target of 4 cents on a dollar. They haven't officially said it's mandated, but they've then provided this fund to allow municipalities to undertake service reviews. The town has been very proactive in looking for efficiencies. We launched the leadership plan last year. We have undertaken a service review, which really meets a lot of the criteria that they talk about in the program in looking at reviewing your services, your programs and services and service levels. However, out of our service inventory, we determined a number of opportunities to do deeper dives or service reviews. So what we're recommending is we've completed 2 of those, or they're in the process of being completed, and next week on July 9th, the Budget Committee will provide an update on those. But we're suggesting that we take this opportunity that the province has given us to fund the next 2 reviews that have been identified as opportunities. And those would be a fleet optimization review as well as a call center consolidation review. So again, we are working towards looking for efficiencies. We always look for that, but this is an opportunity to receive funding to further complete reviews.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Well, Councillor Adams.
No question, I'm simply going to move it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chisholm. The only comment I want to make is, what I find startling about this exercise is the province, who was unable to find 4 cents on every dollar, is now asking us to do it. And as far as I can tell, their only motive is to make room in our budgets to absorb their downloads to the municipal sector. But good soldiers that we are soldiering forward to seek the ability to do that. But, you know, I think what we need to do is brace ourselves. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everybody. Now, the next item is new business. And do we have new business? It's a good thing you moved to go past the hour. Councillor Sanju.
Yes, Mayor Burton, thank you. I have a notice of motion for a waiver of procedure and a motion in accordance with that. Everybody has this on their desks. Would you like me to read this out loud?
Thank you. Yes, the public needs it.
Waiving of procedure, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Robertson, that in accordance with Section 1.22 of the procedure bylaw, the rules of the procedure established in Section 6.12 be waived to permit consideration of the following notice of motion upon its introduction this evening. I have a procedure question. Do we need to vote on that before my motion?
Yes, we do, and
Okay.
it's not subject to debate.
Okay.
I will put the vote immediately. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Councillor Sanju.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Here is our motion. Whereas Councillor Sandu has made a personal request to attend Budget Committee in 2021, therefore be it resolved that Council reconsider the Budget Committee appointments, and that Councillor Sandu be removed from the 2020 Budget Committee and replaced with Councillor Robertson, and that Councillor Robertson be removed from the 2021 Budget Committee and replaced with Councillor Sandu. That is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Robertson.
All right. I think it's self-evident. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried. Oh, I'm not sure I meant it that way.
Could you also preface that with a reconsideration motion, because that was a reconsideration of a previous decision?
All right. So that's in the motion. Right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
And we had unanimous, which is more than 10, so we're good.
Yes.
I think. All right. We now have a motion. This is new business, and in accordance with Section 14.1 of the Procedure Bylaw, the following notice of motion will be considered at the next council meeting to be held on September 23rd, 2019. This is a bus guard pilot project moved by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Palmer. Now, I would just ask the mover and seconder, is this matter, is the time sensitivity of this such that you want to wait till September, or you have a council of colleagues who might be willing to take this tonight?
I think this would be useful to proceed with this evening rather than waiting till the fall.
All right.
Given the timing.
Then let me just retrieve, here we go. So we need a mover and seconder that in accordance with section 1.22 of the procedure bylaw, the rules of procedure established in section 6.12 be waived to permit consideration of the following notice of motion upon its introduction this evening. Moved by Councillor Lishchyna, seconded by Councillor Elgar. All in favor? That carries. All right, the bus guard pilot project. Councillor Adams, I think you owe at least the public a word or two about this.
Well, I think if I read this, it'll become evident as to the reasons for it. And it's a motion on bus guard pilot project, whereas the town of Oakville promotes road safety and works in partnership with Halton Regional Police Services, HRPS, on various road safety programs, whereas the town of Oakville supports the use of cameras on school buses to ensure the traveling motorists obey Ontario's Highway Traffic Act and stop for school buses when the stop arm is deployed as per section 175.12 of the Highway Traffic Act. And whereas HRPS is pursuing a pilot project called Bus Guard to install cameras on school buses to collect data on the location and number of violations that are occurring. And whereas in 2017, the town of Oakville provided a letter of support to HRPS Chief Stephen Tanner to apply for grant funding to install and implement a camera system on school buses within our community. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Oakville supports HRPS's Bus Guard pilot project, and further that the town of Oakville support HRPS implementing this pilot project at the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year, and further that this resolution be circulated to local MPPs Epi Triantafilopoulos and Stephen Crawford, Halton Regional Police Services, City of Burlington, Town of Halton Hills, Town of Milton, the Halton Region, and both local school boards.
Thank you for that. I admire how quickly you can read. Is there discussion? Shall I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Congratulations, everyone. The next item is to, I'm searching for two friendly councillors who might waive procedure again for us to take up a notice of motion that Councillor Duddick and I have brought on Lake Ontario flood mitigation. Councillor Gittings and Councillor Palmer, thank you for that. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. This motion reads, whereas the flooding along Lake Ontario shoreline has adverse environmental and financial effects to the town of Oakville, whereas the town of Oakville experienced significant flooding events in 2017, resulting in significant shoreline, parkland, and harbors rehabilitation costs, whereas the town of Oakville is currently experiencing significant flooding events in 2019 with rehabilitation costs yet to be determined, and whereas the municipality experienced relatively stable lake levels under IJC Plan 1958 DD, now therefore be it resolved that the municipality of Oakville advocate that our federal partners work with the IGC to develop a new plan that includes more effective flood mitigation, and further, that council authorize the mayor to engage with government and non-government organizations and agencies involved in Lake Ontario flood mitigation. Is there any discussion? May I put the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries. Thank you very much. The next items that I have are requests for reports. Are there any other notices of motion that may have escaped my, okay, requests for reports. We have a few. The first request is for that staff report back to council on the costs associated with purchasing please slow down signs and police officer radar signs for each ward to display, as recently seen at FCM in Ottawa. Moved by Councillor Duddick and seconded by Councillor Elgar. Shall this report go ahead? Councillor Adams?
I just want to clarify the police officer radar signs. I believe these are not actually radar, but they're actually the scarecrow kind of sign that's being talked about, just so that people recognize what we're speaking about. And the other question I had was with respect to the please slow down signs and the associated costs. There are different models that are out there in the world of the please slow down signs, and some of them include the municipal logo and some do not. Ours do not, and I'd like it if our staff could report on the use of municipal logo on the please slow down signs.
Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, in addition to the municipal logo, also Halton Regional Police logo, similar to what Burlington has.
So that's right, so there's a question about what logos are appropriate.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then I think I can put the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Good work, Council. Next, Councillor O'Meara and Councillor Duddick would like that staff review the need for an installation of a pedestrian crosswalk at Third Line and Salvatore. Shall this go ahead? All those in favor? Opposed? It goes ahead. Next, moved by Councillor Palmer, seconded by Councillor Sandhu, that staff report back to council on the investments and improvements made to date at the Glen Ashton Cricket Field, including the value of land and improvements, as well as any deficiencies in the field and related space, that staff report on the cost, timing, and process for proceeding with the proposed new cricket field planned for North Park, including the preliminary design and layout, as well as the opportunity to fund ahead of the rest of park development, and that staff report on the planning strategy for future fields as the sport continues to grow, and report on the implications of placing a cricket pitch between two soccer fields to accommodate both sports on one field. Or is it on two fields? Councillor Palmer.
Amendment that staff report back to committee.
Will the report go ahead? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Goes ahead.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I'm out of requests for report. We may be near the end. Council, if two of you would provide us with a motion and a second for consideration of the bylaws, Councillor Longo and Councillor Duddick, all those in favor? The bylaws as presented in the agenda are hereby adopted. That completes the work we had before us. It's been terrific working with you, and I thank you for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.